Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 1 of our story. If you like this what if story and want to see part 2, let me know in the comments below. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends. Also, check the description for more great content and my playlist. This story was posted by Clouds on AO3. Now, let's start. Even after an hour-long shower, Izuku still felt the weight of the past 24 hours clinging to his skin. All Might looked down on him from every wall in his room, judgmental eyes staring straight into his soul. You can't be a hero not without a quirk. Be realistic. Izuku went to bed crying for his broken dream. His room looked empty without all his All Might merch. It wasn't that Izuku hated All Might now, it's just that every time he looked at the smiling hero, all he could think was you can't be a hero. Just because Izuku was finally coming to terms with that fact didn't mean he needed it playing on a loop in his head every time he's at home. He still had a few posters up from some of his other favorite heroes, but he'd changed his sheets to a plain black set that he'd found collecting dust in the linen closet paired with a gold pillowcase. It wasn't official merchandise, but it reminded Izuku of Eraserhead anyway. It had taken a few days for him to gather the courage, but Izuku had finally sat down and updated his hero analysis notebooks, leaving out the parts on All Might's secret weakness. It was oddly comforting. He had thought it would be painful, and it was in some ways, but it was mostly familiar, like his analysis was the only part of himself that hadn't shattered alongside his hero dream. That was why he found himself, during his latest bout with insomnia, browsing a lesser-known hero forum. He'd found it several years earlier and quickly figured out that a lot of underground heroes used it to communicate with each other, since it offered encrypted chats and accounts were only known by random numbers rather than usernames. He'd spent about 2 weeks back then figuring out which accounts corresponded to which heroes, but he had never posted himself. As Izuku drowsily scrolled through old posts, a crazy idea occurred to him. If he couldn't be a hero himself, why couldn't he help the real heroes be better? In the morning, he'd blame it on sleep deprivation and then promptly die of mortification, but that didn't change the fact that, at 2 o'clock in the morning, Izuku Midoriya sent 10 underground heroes in-depth analyses of their quirks and fighting styles. New message 12579, Eraserhead, thank you for the analysis. It was eye-opening to see my strengths and weaknesses from an outside perspective, not to mention the ideas for improvement. Izuku was hyperventilating. Eraserhead, the Eraserhead, had thanked him for his analysis. The Eraserhead. It almost made up for the Kachan and his lackeys beating him up again during lunch. Not quite, because the bullying had gotten worse since the sludge villain incident, but it came close. Several other heroes had also sent him messages thanking him, while others, who had apparently heard of his analyses from their friends, had asked him to send them theirs. He was just finishing up verifying the identities of those who had requested analyses to make sure he wasn't accidentally helping any villains when he saw a blinking notification in the bottom left corner of his screen. New message 12579, Eraserhead, do you analyze villains? Private chat 58726, 𝐿 𝐿, does anyone know who our mystery analyst actually is? 87657, Mr. Brave, does anyone know who any of us are? We're called underground heroes for a reason. 58726, 𝐿 point taken. 72598, Sir Night Eye, it is a valid question though. He came out of nowhere, how do we know he's not a villain giving us false information in order to defeat us? 58726, 𝐿, how do you know it's a he? 12579, Eraserhead, so far, all the information he's given me has been accurate and no villains have known information about me that they shouldn't. Besides, if he was a villain, I think we would have already been targeted, considering he could have easily beaten any one of us using the information in the analyses he sent us. As strange as the situation is, I think he really is trustworthy, but only time will tell. 58726, 𝐿, it's possible he's a pro who's new on the scene. 87657, Mr. Brave, with that level of analysis. More likely he's some veteran deigning to impart his infinite wisdom on the younger generation. He's had an account on this site for years, I checked, but he's never posted before now. 58726, 𝐿, maybe it's Nezu. 12579, Eraserhead, no, I already asked him if he was behind it. I'm leaning more toward a retired pro. 72598. Sir Night Eye, what are we even supposed to call him? If he's a hero, what's his code name? 87657. Mr. Brave, yeah, typing out mystery analyst every time is gonna get old real quick. 12579. Eraserhead, well, there's only one logical way to find out. It had been a little over a week since Izuku had impulsively started sending his analyses to pro heroes, and he had quickly fallen into a new routine. Go to school, hide from 𝐭𝐻 at lunch, more school, run from 𝐭𝐻 after class, maybe catch a villain fight on the way home, do homework, eat dinner, complete analysis requests from the Hero Underground, go to bed. Most of the time, heroes simply wanted an analysis for themselves, but a handful had started sending him videos of villains in action for him to analyze. Today, Izuku logged into his account hesitantly, with 𝐭𝐻's most recent jeers still echoing in his ears. It had been a bad day, and Izuku had failed at both hiding and running, resulting in twice as many beatings. Why had he ever even thought he could be useful to actual heroes when he was just a weak, useless, worthless, quirkless Deku? Izuku shook his head and opened his inbox to find a new message from Eraserhead. New message 12579. Eraserhead, by the way, what's your codename? 𝐭𝐻's voice echoed in Izuku's mind. Useless, worthless Deku. Private chat 12579. Eraserhead, his name is Deku. I'm going to meet up with some friends tonight. I don't know when I'll be home, but it'll probably be pretty late, so don't bother waiting up for me. Izuku yelled as he finished packing his laptop and tried to get his bright red shoes on the correct feet. Okay, baby, his mom smiled with tears in her eyes. I'm so glad you have friends, you've seemed so much happier lately. Tell them I said hi and invite them to dinner sometime. I want to meet these friends you're always talking about. Izuku hummed non-committally as his mom pulled him in for one last kiss on the cheek before he ran out the door. It had been almost 7 months since Izuku had wormed his way into the underground hero community, but tonight would be the first time he would be meeting any of his friends in person. There was a massive drag ring they had been following for a while, and a lot of heroes were coming together to take them down. They had even invited Izuku, well, Deku, to tag along and maybe even be on site to help strategize when their plans inevitably went off the rails. He'd warned them that he wasn't really ready for combat, but there were enough other pros that they didn't think it'd be a problem. The raid itself wouldn't be happening for another few months anyway, but everyone involved was meeting tonight in a secure location so they could make sure they all work well together and start planning. The meeting wasn't in an area Izuku was highly familiar with, but since he'd gotten involved with the underground, he'd spent a lot of time studying maps to create better location analyses and plans for the heroes he helped. So when he exited the train, he confidently followed the mental map he'd memorized before he left. The rundown apartment complex didn't look like much, but it was typical of the areas his friends worked in. He climbed the stairs to the second floor, found the correct apartment, and took a deep breath. Then he knocked. "We're just waiting for Deku, right?" Ms. Joke asked, lounging back in her chair and putting her feet up on the scuff table. 14 other underground pro heroes plus Detective 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 were all gathered around in the dingy apartment, idly snacking on refreshments as they waited for the meeting to officially begin. "He should be here soon," Eraserhead replied flatly. There was a knock on the door, and there he is now. Sir Night Eye rose and called through the door, "How are things in Tokyo?" The group had chosen a question-answer password system to ensure that no uninvited guests crashed the party. Everyone inside waited with bated breath, prepared to attack or evade should the answer be incorrect. The weather was terrible, but the food was great. The heroes exchanged shocked glances. The password was correct, but the voice was that of a teenager, not an old man like they had been expecting. They waited 1 second longer, then Night Eye asked, "Who is this?" "Deku." It was stated as if it were a question, and the person on the other side of the door was apparently young enough that his voice was still cracking. Night Eye looked to the others for confirmation, and Shota shrugged, gesturing to open the door. May as well see where this leads. The kid, because it was undeniably a kid, on the other side of the door was not what Shota was expecting. He was short and scrawny, with just hints of muscles starting to show on his arms, and his dark green hair looked as if he'd lost a battle trying to comb it. To complete the look of an innocent teenager, he was wearing jeans and a t-shirt with, Eraserhead squinted to read the writing, "Yep, that said breathes." Deku was wearing a t-shirt that said breathes on it. It seemed that the rest of the heroes were just as shocked as Shota was, because the whole ensemble sat there silently staring at the kid until he started to awkwardly shuffle his weight between his feet. Finally, Mr. Brave broke the silence. "You're Deku." The kid flinched and Shota sighed. Mr. Brave was more brash than most heroes, but he did get the point across. "Yes." Again with answering as if it were a question. Every head turned to Detective Tsukochi, who just nodded, confirming that the kid was telling the truth, but he looked just as shocked as everyone else. Everyone turned back to look at the kid, who apparently really was Deku, who was still standing awkwardly in front of the open door. "I guess," Ms. Joke started slowly, "we were expecting someone older." The kid just shrugged. "Well," Shota thought, "that's that." He sighed. "Come in and let's get started. It's illogical for you to just stand there all night. And close the door behind you." The kid nodded frantically and practically tripped over himself in his hurry to close the door and sit down. Just who was this kid? "Well," Detective Tsugaochi started, "now that we're all here, I guess we can get started on the mission." "Wait," Ms. Joke leaned forward in her seat, "most of us haven't worked together before, so wouldn't it be a good idea to get to know each other a little more before we get down to business? Wouldn't it be good to get to know Deku? Our curiosity will distract us otherwise." "Actually," Deku spoke softly, "most of you have worked together before, but only in groups of 2 or 3, and no one here has worked with everyone else here with the exception of me and maybe the detective, but I don't know if I count since I do most of my work virtually." The kid seemed to realize that he was starting to mumble and shut his mouth in a tight line as if he were expecting to be scolded for it. "Yeah," Mr. Brave bit the bullet, "despite the fact that we've all worked with you Deku, we don't really know you. Seems kind of unfair when you know enough about each of us that you could probably kill us in our sleep if you wanted to." Deku's eyes widened and his arms started flailing. "I would never do that. And I really don't think I could anyway. My analysis isn't really all that special, anyone could do what I do." Shota didn't agree with that, but he decided to let it lie. "I think Brave makes a good point. What hero school do you go to? Because obviously this kid is training to be a hero, considering he already helps them on a regular basis. Hopefully Nezu would at least be polite when trying to steal him from wherever he was attending." I'm still in middle school, actually. I go to Aldera Junior High. I don't know where I'll be going to high school yet, but I think I'm going to apply for UA's General Education Department. Well, at least Nezu wasn't going to burn any bridges, but why not the hero course? From the way the kid hunched his shoulders, Shota could tell he was trying to appear smaller than he was, which was already pretty darn small. Interesting. Despite how much I'd like to, I can't be a hero. He took a deep breath, as if stealing his courage. I'm quirkless. The words seemed to echo in the small room despite the fact that Deku hardly whispered them. How? He had to have an analysis quirk, or at least one that altered his intelligence. He couldn't be quirkless, could he? Though it would make some of his behavior make a lot more sense. We brought some footage of known drag ring members for you to analyze, Deku. Apparently Tsukochi didn't know how to deal with the metaphorical bomb Deku just dropped either, if you're ready. The kid reached into the yellow backpack he'd brought with him and pulled out a standard notebook and a few pens before nodding. The detective turned on the small TV that had been set up at one end of the room and it started to play footage that a security camera had caught of the drag ring they were tracking. Almost instantly Deku started muttering while his pen started flying across the page. Obvious mutant-type quirk, most likely some kind of fish. No, aquatic mammal. No scales. Most likely can't breathe underwater, then, but probably still weak to fire quirks or dry environments, kind of like gang orca. Then some kind of darkness manipulation quirk. Does it allow him to make solid objects, or just shadows? Could it be used to make someone effectively blind? How bright does light have to be to cancel out the ability? Most effective to corner in an enclosed space with bright light, or with other allies to make him hesitant to completely black out the area. Deku kept analyzing while the heroes stared at him wide-eyed. Yeah, they'd all read Deku's analyses, but it was another thing entirely to see it in person. The video ended after about 5 minutes and the next started playing automatically. Deku hardly paused in his mutter storm, just continuing his notes where he left off. Shota pulled his eyes away from Deku when he saw movement in the corner of his eye. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 was gesturing to him frantically, widening her eyes and lifting up strands of her long hair before pointing at Deku. Shota looked at her in confusion and she rolled her eyes. Use your quirk, she mouthed. Ah. If he had some kind of analysis quirk he didn't know about or was hiding for some reason, it might make sense. It wasn't that Shota didn't believe the kid was quirkless, 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 didn't call him out on it at least, but it couldn't hurt to have some additional confirmation. Making sure that Deku was still focused on the video and not looking at him, Shota activated his quirk. The rest of the heroes had already noticed the side conversation and were looking at the kid, waiting for any reaction to having his quirk cancelled. Deku didn't even seem to notice Shota's eyes on him, much less a sudden absence of his quirk. His mutter storm continued at the same pace as before and his pen didn't slow down. The kid didn't even stutter. It surprised Shota enough that he blinked and his hair fell in front of his face. The heroes traded glances and Shota could have sworn he saw 𝐻𝐻𝐽 mouth wow. He agreed full-heartedly with the sentiment. The police had only managed to scrounge up about a half hour of footage from the cartel, but that was enough to fill almost half of Deku's notebook. He put down his pencil and started massaging the stiffness out of his hand. Okay, I think I have a good idea of what we're up against. This is a lot more footage than I usually have to work with, so that's nice. I'd never thought about that, Mr. Brave said. I guess we all guessed you were older, so we weren't about how dangerous it must be for you to go out and supplement the videos we send. I am so sorry. Deku looked confused. What do you mean supplement? Sir Night Eye spoke this time. You know, hitting the streets, finding the villains in the videos and making your own observations. If I'd known Deku was a kid, I'd never have let you do that. Deku looked panicked and flailed his arms again. I never do that. My mom would kill me and then ground me until I was 80. The videos you send me are usually more than enough, and sometimes I can manage to find some news footage, but I wouldn't dream of following these guys myself, I promise. You mean all the analyses you've sent us are based only on the videos we've sent you? Shota said incredulously. He remembered a few times he only been able to find a minute or so of footage, but Deku had still provided a high-quality analysis. From the faces around the table, he wasn't the only one. The Shirakawa murders, 𝐻𝐻𝐽 sounded numb. I only sent you 15 seconds of video. Deku gave a shaky smile and rubbed the back of his neck. Yeah, that one was kind of difficult. I couldn't really find anything else in the news or online either. But the mission worked out okay and you caught the guy, so it wasn't that bad. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 looked slightly nauseous. Somehow, the meeting progressed without any more major surprises from Deku and they set up some tentative plans, but mostly things would depend on what happened with the cartel in the next few months. It wasn't until the meeting was wrapping up that Shota realized that this meeting wasn't in a safe part of town, which wasn't a problem for the pro-heroes and professional detective in attendance, but was a problem for the 14-year-old Deku. Kid, do you have someone coming to pick you up? Deku shook his head. We don't have a car. I just took the train here. You don't have to worry about me. Somehow that just made Shota more worried. 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 seemed to agree with him. I'll take him home. You don't have to do that, detective. I'm fine, really. This isn't for you, Deku. I, as a cop, don't feel comfortable letting a 12-year-old walk home alone at 2 in the morning. I'm 14. Not helping your case, problem child. Shota hid his smile behind his capture weapon when Deku had the audacity to look betrayed. He couldn't help himself, this kid had potential. 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 was already grabbing his keys and heading for the door. If I'm taking you home, I'll probably need a real name. I already told you that you don't need to do that, the kid muttered, but he gave a blinding smile anyway. I'm Izuku Midoriya. As soon as the door was closed, all semblance of professionalism disappeared and 𝐻𝐻𝐽 squealed, "He's so adorable. Did you know he was so adorable, Eraser? Why didn't anyone warn me?" Maybe because that adorable kid is a good enough analyst to take down a serial killer with only 15 seconds of video, Night Eye deadpanned. 𝐻𝐻𝐽 at least had the good grace to look embarrassed. What does it say about us that we legit thought that a 14-year-old was a retired pro for 7 months? Mr. Brave laughed, causing a chain reaction as each of the pros in the room started to chuckle. Eraser raised one eyebrow. I think that says more about him than it does about us, but he still couldn't stop his smile. One of the heroes sobered as he realized something. The fact still stands that Deku is a quirkless teenager, and any plans that required him to be on site just went out the window. The room went silent for a few moments as the heroes considered that. Not necessarily, Night Eye spoke up. Teenagers can still be on site if it's part of an internship. I call dibs. Ms. Joke yelled. Mr. Brave scowled. You can't just call dibs, Joke, he's not even part of a hero course yet. But he will be, Shota said. I have a hard time believing Nezu would ever pass up a chance to teach someone like Deku, even if he had to get in through the sports festival. Though that wouldn't stop Shota from putting his name in for the recommendation exam. That kid needed every advantage he could get. Nezu didn't know what he was expecting when he opened his inbox that morning, maybe another complaint about Tagata losing his breathes again despite his massive improvements since the sports festival. It certainly wasn't emails from 15 pro heroes, only 2 of which had ever recommended a student before, all requesting to recommend a single student to UA. Nezu sighed. Most likely this Izuku Midoriya had a technology manipulation quirk and was trying to increase his chances. It had been done before, but never this obviously. Oh well, it would be relatively easy to check. The student really should have looked at which pros taught at UA before including Eraserhead on his list of recommenders. He pressed the intercom. Aizawa, would you come to my office please? A few minutes later, his door swung open right as Aizawa was about to knock. The teacher just looked at him unimpressed and said the second thing to surprise the principal that morning, is this about the student I submitted for recommendations? Nezu's eyes widened, you mean it wasn't a fake recommendation? Aizawa just glared at him, is it that hard to believe that I might take a liking to a kid? No, Nezu smiled in excitement. But would you like to explain why 14 other pro heroes also recommended the same student? Aizawa swore under his breath, they all recommended him too. Nezu nodded. Whatever story was behind these recommendations was quickly becoming more interesting. Aizawa just shook his head, I knew we should have discussed this last night. It's illogical for everyone to recommend him. He sighed heavily, do you remember when I told you about Deku? I remember you asking if I was the one sending out mysterious analyses, if that's what you mean. Aizawa nodded. Well, he's gotten quite the reputation in the underground, but no one had ever met him face to face before last night. He's part of the group that was invited to raid the Durago cartel. Nezu gestured for Aizawa to continue. He's 14. If Nezu had been drinking tea, he would have been tempted to do a spit take. He had read some of those analyses. A 14-year-old did that. He could see why so many pros had recommended Midoriya. If he had been there, Nezu would probably have put in a recommendation of his own. I see. I take it he's already planning on attending UA. Yes, he told us he's applying to general education, but I think he'd jump at the hero course if he had the opportunity. I can try to give him a pep talk if he needs more convincing, although maybe MIC or Joke would be better for that job. He doesn't seem to think he can be a hero. Nezu ped his head to the side, his analysis is already sought after by working pros, why wouldn't he think he has what it takes? I get the feeling that he hasn't had a lot of encouragement from, well, anyone really. He's quirkless. Now Nezu was really glad he wasn't currently drinking tea. It wasn't often that anyone managed to surprise him, and here this Midoriya had managed to do so 4 times in 1 hour, and he wasn't even here. Are you sure? Nezu had to ask. Aizawa just looked tired. I activated my quirk while he was analyzing a video and I honestly think he didn't even notice. He didn't pause, stutter, or even decrease the quality of his analyses, and Tsukochi didn't register anything he said as a lie. He paused. I know that there's never been a quirkless hero before, but if anyone can do it, Deku can. But you and I know just how biased the entrance exam is and he isn't exactly made of muscle. With his mind, I think he'll have a better chance at passing an obstacle course and interview than an all-out brawl against robots. I agree, I'll send him the invite for the recommendation exam. Does he know you recommended him? No. Well, I guess it'll be a surprise then. It was definitely a surprise. Mom, do you know why I have a letter from UA? Izuku looked at the envelope on the table like it was a bomb, which, for all he knew, it could have been. His mind was moving a mile a minute trying to figure out why in the world UA would be contacting him 3 whole months before the entrance exam. Was this normal? Was this just saying that they received his application? No, if that was the case then they would have sent it right after he submitted the application months ago. Was something wrong? Were they rejecting him because he was quirkless? That had to be it. Izuku felt his heart sink. Of course the policy allowing quirkless entry was probably a PR ploy. He could already feel the tears fighting to fall from his eyes, making it difficult to see the clear type of his name on the envelope. Of course he wouldn't be able to go to UA. He was an idiot to think otherwise. Izuku. Izuku. What's wrong? What did the letter say? Izuku's voice was choked with tears. I don't know, I haven't opened it yet. The alarmed look in 𝐒𝐿's eyes softened. She knew how bad anxiety could make things seem. She'd struggled with it herself for years, after all. If only she'd been able to give her son a quirk rather than an anxiety disorder. She pushed that thought down along with the guilt that came with it. No use thinking that now, those kinds of thoughts weren't going to do anything to help Izuku through his anxiety attack. Breathe with me, Izuku. How about you open the letter before jumping to conclusions about what's inside? Izuku didn't respond, but he did calm down a little. Would you like me to open it for you? This time he took a deep breath and shook his head. He still reached out like he was expecting the letter to bite him, but it was better than him crying over a sealed envelope. Izuku was careful not to tear the envelope as he opened it, and 𝐒𝐿 watched his face with concern as his eyes tracked along the paper and gradually grew wider and wider with every line. Izuku. Are you okay? They want me to take the recommendation exam. Izuku said numbly, they want me to take the recommendation exam. What? How? Well, that's good. 𝐒𝐿 tried to smile through her worries. She had been so happy the last few months since her son had finally seemed to come to terms with the fact that he wouldn't be a hero. It wasn't that she didn't want to support his dreams, but she'd sleep a lot easier at night if she at least knew that he was safe. I think so, but Mom, Izuku looked up at her, the recommendation program is based on recommendations. Who would have? He trailed off, but 𝐒𝐿 could practically see his brain making some connection or another before he whispered, no. It couldn't have been. But who else? They wouldn't have. Not for someone like me. Would they? He seemed to snap out of his reverie. Mom, I need to message some of my friends, I'll be in my room, okay? 𝐒𝐿 just nodded. Oh okay, I'll tell you when dinner's ready. Izuku smiled, but it seemed more like an afterthought. He was still shocked. Thanks Mom. You're the best, before heading off to his room. 𝐒𝐿 picked up the forgotten letter and read it through. It may not be what she wanted, it definitely wasn't safe, but if it was really what Izuku wanted, could she really say no? Izuku hurriedly logged on and opened a group message to all the pros who were participating in the raid. New group 12857. Deku, would anybody care to explain why I got a letter from UA this morning inviting me to take the hero course recommendation exam? Several users are typing. 58726, 𝐿 yeah, I might have had something to do with that. 87657, Mr. Brave wait. You did. I recommended him. 12579, Eraserhead, we should have discussed it. Nedzu called me into his office and thought it was a prank. It was completely illogical for us all to recommend him. 12857, Deku. 72598, Sir Knight, I don't think it's that illogical, Eraser. After all, his taking the exam. 12579, Eraserhead, while I see your point, he still would have been invited to take the exam if he only had one recommendation. Any more than that is just inefficient. 12857, Deku 𝐒𝐻𝐿 58726, 𝐿 Deku sweetie. Are you okay? 72598, Sir Knight I. 12579, Eraserhead. 87657, Mr. Bravo SHD guys. I think we might have killed him. 12579, Eraserhead kid, you're scaring us. We need you to tell us if you're okay. 72598, Sir Knight 𝐒𝐻𝐿 took him home, so he knows where the kid lives, right? Who has his number? 12579, Eraserhead I'll call him. 12857, Deku sorry guys, my mom came in and I had to calm down and explain to her why I was screaming. Wait. Please tell me you didn't call 𝐒𝐭𝐴. 72598, Sir Night Eye sorry kid. When you stopped responding we were scared something had happened. 12857, Deku at 12579. Stop. I'm okay. Please don't call the detective. 12579, Eraserhead I explained what happened and that it's a false alarm. Sorry for overreacting Deku. 87657, Mr. Brave yeah, sorry dude. 58726, Ms. Joke ditto 87657, Mr. Brave so why were you screaming? Did you see a spider? 12857, Deku no. It's just, do you guys really think I could be a hero? 12579, Eraserhead obviously. Your analysis is better than even most pros are capable of and you choose to use it to help heroes rather than hurt them. You've got more potential than my entire class this year. 58726, Ms. Joke you expelled your entire class this year 12579, Eraserhead exactly 12857, Deku why? What I do really isn't that special. It's just a hobby I've had since I was a kid. 87657, Mr. Brave Deku, you had the entire underground convinced that you were a retired pro for like 7 months. 12857, Deku I am so sorry. Did I make it sound like I was a pro? Oh my goodness. I'm so sorry, I'm gonna have to read through all my old messages and make sure and I'm probably gonna get arrested for fraud and impersonating a pro and I am so sorry. 58726, Ms. Joke OMG. He's freaking out. It's so cute. 87657, Mr. Brave hahaha. Dude. Deku. Stop freaking out. It was our fault for assuming. No one's gonna arrest you over a misunderstanding. Unless Eraser's still on the phone with 𝐒𝐭𝐴. 12579, Eraserhead if I was I'd have him arrest you, Brave, not Deku 72598, Sir Knight I'm more concerned about why you don't believe us. 12857, Deku it's just, nobody's ever told me I could be a hero before. It feels nice. 58726, Ms. Joke. Who do I need to kill? 12857, Deku what? 12579, Eraserhead Joke, number 58726, Ms. Joke yes. 87657, Mr. Brave how many pitchforks do I need to bring? 72598, Sir Night Eye guys, if you make Deku scream again, his mom will be the one planning murder. 12857. Deku thanks guys. It's been fun, but I need to go re-evaluate my life now. 12857 has left the chat 72598, Sir Night Eye are you happy now? 58726, Ms. Joke no, because people haven't been giving my son the love and encouragement he deserves 12579, Eraserhead he's not your son 58726, Ms. Joke does that mean he's yours? 12579 has left the chat 72598, Sir Night Eye at this point, we can't change how people have treated him. All we can do is make sure he knows we believe in him moving forward. 72598 has left the chat 87657 has left the chat 58726 has left the chat okay, kid, the recommendation exam is in a little over 2 months. It takes place about a month before the standard exam so that if a student doesn't make the cut for the recommendation spots, they can still try again with the general population. Izuku looked up at Eraserhead from where he was stretching on the floor of the gym. I guess that makes sense. How many spots are open? Normally, 4, although I think Nezu is looking into making another spot this year due to extenuating circumstances. Izuku frowned. You mean because people would get mad if a quirkless kid took one of the recommendation spots? Aizawa sighed, but nodded. It's the world we live in, kid, but we'll deal with it if we have to. For now, we just need to focus on getting you physically ready so you don't die. What training have you done so far? Izuku thought for a moment. Well, I mostly focused on my mental abilities, obviously. Then, when you guys started sending me videos, I realized just how physically fit heroes need to be. Even if I'd kind of given up by that point, it was still inspiring. I started lifting weights and jogging, I've even tried a little park hour and free running, even if I'm not every good at that yet. I'm a lot stronger than I used to be, but, he hugged himself, I'm still pretty weak. Sorry. Aizawa felt his heart break. This kid was doing amazing when you considered that everyone had told him it was impossible to even try, but he still had a long way to go. Alright, I want you to keep doing what you've been doing. We're not going to be able to make a huge difference in strength in just 2 months, but we can improve your speed and parkour, as well as get you some combat skills. He gestured for Izuku to stand up. So, Deku, do you know how to fall or how to take a hit? I mean, I've been hit plenty of times before, so I think I know that one. Aizawa's expression soured. That is not the same thing. I guess that's what we'll start with. When Izuku went home that night, he was sore and covered in bruises, but couldn't keep the smile off his face. He could do it. He could be a hero. He might not be able to be like All Might, but, the more he thought about it, being an underground hero sounded like more fun anyway. The next 2 months flew by. Izuku trained with a different pro hero every day of the week. Eraser taught him hand-to-hand combat, Ms. Joke took him on parkour runs, Mr. Brave helped him with speed. It was amazing. Izuku felt so much stronger, and even if he couldn't hold his own against Eraser yet, he wasn't falling into dumpsters as often as he had when he was doing parkour on his own. The morning of the recommendation exam, Izuku opened his computer to find dozens of good luck messages. Apparently, word had gotten around that Deku was a lot younger than anyone had thought, and they were all excited for him. It was contagious. Not that he wouldn't have been excited without the messages, he still would have been, it's just. He'd probably be a lot more nervous than excited. Inko waved to Izuku as he left, then let her hand fall as soon as he was out of sight. Her baby, off to go be a hero. As she wiped the tears from her eyes, even she didn't know if they were happy tears or sad ones. You'll have 3 hours for the written portion of the exam. Begin. Izuku sat in the auditorium with the other students after the written portion. He didn't think he got 100% because he probably got at least a few questions wrong in the English portion, but there had been a hero analysis essay at the end that, while optional, would probably bring up his score. But that wasn't what he was worried about. Hello, listeners. Rock on. The written part of the recommendation test is over. The practical's next, and then, finally, the interview. Izuku resisted the urge to mutter like a fanboy as the voice hero explained, this portion will be a 3-kilometer obstacle course run in groups of 6. We will be looking not only at your times, but at your ingenuity and use of your quirks, so please go all out. As you leave the auditorium, please take a number from either Midnight or Snipe, these will determine what group you'll be in for the race. Any questions? All right. Let's go. As they slowly filed out of the auditorium, Izuku looked around him and tried to evaluate the quirks of those around him. There were a few obvious mutant quirks, but there were some like a boy with a skull face and other with two-toned hair that weren't as obvious. Some didn't appear to have physical manifestations of their quirks at all. Izuku tried to calm his breathing. No matter what, he knew that all of them had strong quirks, they wouldn't have been recommended otherwise, and soon Izuku would have to face them. He counted his blessings that he wouldn't be facing them in combat. Even with 2 months of training, he still ended up on his back most of the time, and he wasn't sure he was ready to face people using their quirks quite yet. The first group was called up and went to the starting line. Present MIC nodded to Snipe, who pointed his gun to the sky and fired. The 6 were off quickly, and Izuku felt his stomach sink as he saw their quirks. They were amazing. Izuku couldn't possibly compete. One boy controlled the wind to blow him forward while leaving his opposition in dust. Another stayed neck and neck with him by skating on ice that he shot from his foot. To Izuku, it seemed like the race was over before it even began, with the wind user finishing just barely ahead of the ice guy. Even present MIC seemed shocked. He forced himself to pay attention. As the next group ran the course, thankfully much slower since this group didn't have anyone with quirks that allowed them to completely ignore all the obstacles. They all used their quirks creatively, and Izuku tried not to think about what everyone else would think when he didn't use a quirk at all during the exam. Hey, are you okay? Izuku jerked up to see a girl with a high ponytail looking at him with concern. You were breathing kind of fast. Yeah, Izuku said, I guess I'm just kinda nervous. Everyone here has such amazing quirks. The girl laughed. Yeah, I guess so. My name is Momo Yorozu. You. Izuku Midoriya. Nice to meet you, Midoriya. My group's next, wish me luck. Izuku nodded as she left and went to the starting line. This time he watched carefully to see how everyone used their quirks to make it past the obstacles. Yorozu apparently had some sort of creation quirk because she pulled a pair of rollerblades from nowhere to breeze past the flat sections and made a spring-loaded grappling hook to fly up the cliff. Another used her oil secretion quirk to slide more quickly down the slide and make the track more slick for the other examinees. With each group that went, Izuku got more and more ideas on how to pass the obstacles, and he got more and more excited. He even saw opportunities where students were underutilizing their quirks and got ideas to help them improve. Yeah, he couldn't replicate any of their quirks, but he could take the best ideas from all of them and get a decent time. Finally, it was Izuku's turn to be called, and he took a deep breath as he walked to the starting line. He bounced on his toes as ideas bounced around his mind on how to clear the obstacles. The moment Snipe's gun went off, he ran toward the first obstacle, which looked like the first hill of a roller coaster. Other students were already starting to climb up the side as Izuku reached the base of it and looked around. He smiled as he grabbed a small board from the base and tucked it inside his shirt, then started climbing up toward the apex. Most of the students were climbing straight across, rather than up, and they were already on the second half, while some had already cleared the obstacle. Izuku hoped this gamble would pay off and that Eraser wouldn't kill him if he fell before he pulled himself up to stand on top of the wooden structure. He pulled out the board he'd brought and set it on thin metal track that lined the top, then carefully stood on top of it as if it was a skateboard, pinwheeling his arms as he almost lost his balance. With a quick prayer, he shoved off and began to slide down the hill, rocketing past the two students who were still climbing, putting him in fourth place. He hit the ground with a roll when he reached the end of the track and looked at the next obstacle, which involved hopping from different-sized pillars that ascended up to a thin wall. Unfortunately, there wasn't anything he could do to speed this up, but he was grateful for his parkour training as he jumped easily, maintaining his place in the running. The next obstacle was a thin cement wall about the width of a balance beam that students were running across. Izuku stood in shock for a moment as he watched the second-place examinee, a blue-haired boy with engines in his legs, literally glide across the wall on his heels. Was he related to Ingenium? Izuku shook his head and started running. The next obstacle wasn't so much of an obstacle as a slide that dumped into a pool of water. Izuku thought back to the engine boy who had been gliding on his heels. If he could reduce the surface that touched the slide, he could reduce friction and move faster. He also remembered the girl with the oil quirk from a few rounds before and looked quickly. There. A line on the left half of the slide was slightly more shiny than the rest from where she had made it more slick. Izuku laid down and pushed off, lifting his body so that only his heels and shoulders were touching the slide. The decreased friction combined with the oil and he managed to pass another examinee, putting him in third place. He swam quickly toward the next obstacle, a cliff face that went straight up. He didn't have a grappling hook like Yorozu did, but he had seen her drop it when she'd cleared the cliff. He took a deep breath and dived. Sure enough, there it was, sitting at the bottom of the pool. He grabbed it and pulled himself up onto the ledge at the bottom of the cliff. He took a moment to familiarize himself with his new tool, then looked up. The obstacle after the cliff climb was a rope strung across two spires, then climbing down the second spire to arrive at the top of a plateau. Izuku thought for a moment before aiming. Hopefully he wouldn't be penalized for this. He smiled as he felt it catch, then braced himself and pressed the button to retract it. He was yanked from his location, flew past both the cliff climb and the rope bridge, and hit the side of the plateau. Hard. Izuku groaned as he pulled himself up and took note of where the other students were. He was now in second place. He couldn't see the first-place examinee, but he'd seen all previous examinees disappear for a minute before re-emerging from the waterfall, so he assumed there was some sort of cave. He paused as he saw a narrow fissure in the middle of the plateau, with rock climbing holds on both sides going down. The gap was only about 4 feet wide in most areas, and Izuku was just over 5 feet tall, so he nodded resolutely, then braced himself with an arm and a leg on either side of the fissure and shimmied down as quickly as he could. At the bottom of the fissure was a short tunnel that Izuku would have to army crawl through, and the first examinee had just entered it. Thankfully, the tunnel was wide enough for multiple people. Izuku got down on his stomach and moved as quickly as he could, passing the first-place examinee at the very end of the tunnel. There was a waterfall in front of them and Izuku ran straight toward it without pausing. He'd seen plenty of others run out of the waterfall in the previous rounds. The water was cold and almost knocked him over, but he kept running until he could breathe again. From here it was a straight shot to the finish line. Izuku ran as hard as he could, hearing the footsteps of the other examinee as he struggled to catch up. There was a cry behind him and Izuku heard the sound of engines. No. myheroacademia. Izuku pushed himself harder. Almost there. But myheroacademia was too fast on a straightaway and he zoomed past Izuku, who crossed the finish line a full 5 seconds after. Gasping for breath and fighting tears. Second place. Good, but not good enough. He needed to be the best if he was going to prove that a quirkless student belonged in the hero course. Hey, Midoriya. Yorozu was at his side. That was amazing. I hadn't even considered that anyone else would try to use my grappling hook. I wish I'd thought to bypass an obstacle like that. That was shameful. myheroacademia cried, chopping his hands through the air. You are supposed to use your own quirk. Not coast by on the work of others. Izuku felt his heart sink. myheroacademia was right, he wouldn't have done half as well if he hadn't paid attention to the other rounds and used them to his advantage. He really was worthless, wasn't he? Why did he think he deserved this? Hey now, listener, don't be so hard on him. Present MIC interrupted. We told everyone to go all out and this examinee showed great creativity and used the environment to his advantage, an essential trait for any hero. Not everyone has physical quirks, YA no. myheroacademia straightened. My apologies. He bowed to Midoriya. I see that I was in the wrong. On further consideration, it really was truly impressive how you managed to get ahead of the other examinees. My name is Tenya Ida, what is yours? Izuku's eyes widened. He didn't think anyone had ever apologized to him before. Aiku and Midoriya, he stuttered out, nice to meet you. myheroacademia, Ida, smiled, it is a pleasure to meet you as well. All right. Present MIC yelled, now don't get too down if you didn't get first in the obstacle courses. We'll be deciding who gets the recommendation spots based on a combination of the written, physical, and interview. So if you did poorly, don't lose hope. And if you did well, don't get too comfortable. Now go. Get to the locker rooms and get cleaned up. Interviews will be in Principal Nezu's office in 30 minutes. Don't be late. All the examinees sat awkwardly in the lobby outside Nezu's office, waiting for their turn to be called. The atmosphere was tense not only because everyone was nervous, but because the boy with the wind quirk kept glaring at the boy with the ice quirk, who didn't seem to notice and kept staring straight ahead. Izuku couldn't think of why the wind was so angry at ice, considering that wind won their round of the physical, but he figured there must be a good reason. Unless of course wind was like Kaken and just angry all the time, that was always a possibility. Better give him a wide berth. So, a girl with green hair broke the silence. That physical was something else, right? Yeah, another examinee laughed, some serious American Ninja Warrior stuff. Do you really think we'll have to climb that much as heroes? My arms are still sore. I think it'll depend on what kind of hero you want to be. Izuku hadn't even realized he'd opened his mouth until everyone was looking at him. Oh no. He hurried on in a panic. I mean, well, daylight heroes probably don't have to climb as much since most daytime villains are on street level, but it's very helpful for underground heroes to get a bird's eye view of situations and they spend most of their time patrolling from the rooftops rather than the street. Daylight heroes stay on the street so that people can see them, so they don't have much use for climbing, except for maybe in a rescue situation and… I'll shut up now. Izuku's face was hot in embarrassment and he looked at the floor as the rest of the examinees stared at him. I'd never thought of it that way, Yorozu said, and Izuku shot her a grateful look. I'm planning on being a spotlight hero myself. I never really hear about underground heroes, so I sometimes forget they exist. That's kind of the point of underground heroes, though, isn't it? So that no one really knows they exist. The green-haired girl spoke up. I've considered going that route, but I'm not really sure. My quirk is kinda gross, so I'm not sure I'd ever be very popular anyway. Izuku perked up. Your quirk involves disconnecting your limbs, right? I saw you use it a few times during the practical. How much muscle control do you have over a body part when it's disconnected? What would happen if a body part was injured or destroyed when it wasn't connected? Izuku realized he was rambling and quickly slammed his mouth shut. The green-haired girl sat in shock for a moment before responding. Yeah. My quirk is called Lizard Tail Splitter and it allows me to disconnect any part of my body at will. I can split into up to 50 pieces at a time. Her right hand disconnected and scuttered toward Izuku and up his arm, poking him in the cheek. I can fully control them, even disconnected, and levitate them. If any are destroyed, I can regenerate them, but it takes a lot of energy, so I prefer to just call them back if I can. That's so cool. Izuku gushed. That would be great for underground work. Most villains wouldn't think to look for an eye or an ear hiding in the corner of a room, so your quirk would be perfect for intelligence gathering. It would also probably be useful for sabotage, since a hand could easily fit into small spaces. You'll make a wonderful underground hero if you choose, but don't just do it because you think your quirk is gross. She smiled widely. Thanks. I'd never thought of it like that. Izuku nodded. Yuruzu, your quirk is some kind of creation, right? That grappling hook was really complicated, but you made it no problem. What kind of objects can you create? Yuruzu smiled. My quirk is called creation. I can transform the lipids in my body into any non-living thing I want, but I have to understand the molecular structure. I've been studying chemistry since I first developed my quirk, so I can produce any element on the periodic table fairly easily as well as most known molecules. It's just a question of how they all come together. Most of the other examinees were paying attention to the conversation now and they were quick to pipe up with their own observations of Yayuru's quirk. After that, another person piped up and soon everyone was sharing their quirks. Even Wind and Ice had been roped into the discussion. Yeah. My quirk is Whirlwind. I can control any wind and I am super passionate about hero work. Izuku was almost physically blown back by the sheer energy that Wind put off. Okay, so being constantly angry like Kaken was out, but if he said passion was so important, it was easy to see why he didn't like Ice, who remained blank-faced and probably didn't express passion for anything. Now it was Ice's turn. He paused for a moment, then said flatly, my quirk is called half hot, half cold. I can produce ice from my right side and fire from my left, but I don't use my fire. His tone clearly communicated that he was done talking and everyone sat awkwardly for a moment as they digested his declaration. Wind was glaring at him again with even more intensity than before. Well, that's cool then, Yuruzu said finally, then turned to Izuku. What about you, Midoriya, what's your quirk? It wasn't really obvious from the physical round. Izuku's stomach sunk. Of course they were going to ask about his quirk. These were the first people that acted like they could be friends since he'd gotten his quirk, well, besides the underground heroes, but did they really count since they were all so much older than him? They'd reject him as soon as they knew, everyone did. How was he going to get out of this? All of a sudden, the door to Nedzu's office opened and an examinee walked out, followed by the principal himself, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku nodded in relief and practically ran into the office. Nedzu smiled knowingly and shut the door behind him. Have a seat. So you're the famous Deku I've heard so much about. To tell you the truth, I was quite surprised to hear that you were so young. Izuku sat down across from the principal and nodded. I honestly wasn't trying to trick anyone, he laughed. I freaked out when I realized how old Eraser and everyone thought I was. I thought it would be obvious from my analysis that I was just a fanboy. Nedzu poured 2 cups of tea and took a sip. I've read some of your analyses. They are extremely impressive. Izuku shook his head quickly. They're really not. They're just a fanboy's rambling and I have no idea why heroes like them so much. Everyone else seems to think they're creepy. Well, Nedzu clapped his hands together. While we're on the subject, perhaps you wouldn't mind giving me a brief analysis of your fellow examinees. Izuku's eyes lit up as he started to wonder. Well, there's Yuruzu. She's got a creation quirk that is super cool. It wouldn't be easy to use, but she's put in a massive amount of work learning chemistry so that she can create pretty much anything. The only weaknesses I can see are maybe how fast she can think under pressure. Also, if she has to create a lot in a short amount of time, I'm not sure she has the fat stores for that. Then there's the girl with the lizard tail quirk. She can separate her body parts, which would be perfect for intelligence gathering. The interview continued with Izuku rambling as Nezu listened and sipped his tea, occasionally interrupting with an observation or question. Before Izuku knew it, a half hour had passed and there were 2 empty cups of tea sitting on the desk. Well, Deku, thank you. Nezu stood and walked around the desk. You may go rejoin the other applicants outside, or you may go home if you wish. Wait, the interview is over. Izuku looked confused, but I just did some analysis, which I was going to do for fun anyway. Isn't the interview supposed to be difficult? Aren't you supposed to ask why I deserve a place at UA? Why I deserve to be a hero? Nezu looked at him curiously. Your analysis is a valuable skill and I never doubted that you were deserving as you put it. Would you prefer the interview were more difficult? Izuku waved his hands. Well, no, it's just, he rubbed the back of his neck, this just felt like tea with a friend. Nezu's eyes brightened and he smiled. Then I hope we can do this again sometime, regardless of your results. Izuku returned the smile and Nezu led him back out into the lobby and grabbed the next student, and just like that, his entrance exam was over. Izuku had an anxiety attack every day, right before the mail came. He tried to tell himself that it was just a letter, that it wasn't important and wasn't worth getting worked up over. But it wasn't just a letter, was it? It was a letter from UA, a letter that would determine his future, a letter that would tell him whether or not he was worthy to be a hero. And there it was, the anxiety attack was back. Izuku sighed. He thought he'd already done this today, why did he have to do it again? It had been a week since the entrance exam and there still wasn't a letter. Not that the letter couldn't come later than a week after the exam. Present MIC had said in the introduction that letters normally came between 5 days to 2 weeks after, but Izuku just wanted this over with already. It was torture just waiting, not knowing if he was good enough or not. There was a knock at the door. Izuku! His mom called out, could you get the door? My hands are full making dinner. Okay, Mom. He got up from the couch and opened the door, only to do a double take when he saw who it was. Hey kid, Eraser said, we brought you something. Can we come in? Izuku stood aside in shock, allowing Eraser, Ms. Joke, and Mr. Brave, all in civilian garb, to come inside. Sorry Night Eye couldn't come, Ms. Joke said, he's in the middle of a major case right now. Yeah, right, Brave laughed, the old man's just a spoil sport. Mom. Izuku said as he walked into the kitchen, the 3 pro heroes trailing close behind. These are my friends. This is Eraserhead, Ms. Joke, and Mr. Brave. Inko's eyes widened. These are the pro hero friends you told me about when you were recommended, right? When Izuku nodded, she bowed. Thank you all for being so kind to my son. I was so excited when he told me he had friends, so imagine my shock a few months ago when I learned that all his friends were pro heroes. Eraser raised an eyebrow. He suspected that Izuku didn't get a lot of encouragement to be a hero, but all his friends. She was probably exaggerating. He's a great kid, Midoriya-san. Ms. Joke laughed. We're lucky to have met him. By the way, since I'm not in costume right now, you can just call me EMI Fukukado. Nice to meet you, Fukukado-san. Yeah, me too. Mr. Brave said, my name is Haruto Nakamura. The other 2 looked at Eraser, who stared back for a minute before sighing, I'm Shota Aizawa. Deku's a smart kid, you must be proud of him. Inko's face soured slightly at the nickname, but it was almost too fast for the pros to catch before she was smiling again. I wish he would pick a better career path though. Heroics isn't very forgiving for someone like Izuku. Izuku looked like he wanted to sink into the floor as the room went cold. Fix this. So why are you guys here? Not that you're not welcome, you totally are, it's just that you've never come over before and you guys sounded like you planned it, but I didn't know about it, unless I forgot. Oh no. Did I forget? Mr. Brave, Nakamura, laughed. No Deku, you didn't forget. We wanted to surprise you. Show him eraser. Aizawa rolled his eyes, but had a small smile as he reached into his pocket and took out an envelope. My UA letter. Aizawa handed it to the kid, who looked at it with wide eyes. Of course, kid. Did you forget I work at UA? We wanted to be here when you open it. Izuku looked to his mother, who smiled sadly. You and your friends go open it in the living room. I'll keep working on dinner and you all can come eat after, okay? Izuku nodded and went back to sit on the couch. Aizawa sat beside him, while Nakamura sat on the chair and Fukukado made her home on the floor. All three looked at Izuku in anticipation and he took a deep breath before tearing open the envelope. He then promptly started crying. Oh no! Eraser! I thought you said it was good news. I'm going to kill you. Fukukado screamed. Aizawa looked slightly panicked. It is good news. I don't know why he's crying, I swear. I'm just so happy. Izuku choked out, saving Aizawa from being physically wrestled to the floor. I made it. I'm going to UA. I'm gonna be a hero. Congratulations, Deku. Nakamura said, you deserve it. Fukukado gave him a big hug. Oh, I'm so excited for you. I kinda wish you were coming to Ketsubatsu with me, but you're gonna need Nezu to help you with that big brain of yours. She sighed. Oh well, there's still internships, and I'm sure you'll hear about me all the time since Eraser's madly in love with me. No, I'm not. Aizawa denied. Stop telling people that, joke. It's not a joke, I am. Fukukado laughed loudly and tried to mess up Aizawa's hair, but he dodged and scowled at her. She responded by sticking out her tongue. I swear even Deku is more mature than you. Maturity is overrated. Nakamura said, then crossed his eyes and pulled a face, making Izuku giggle. Aizawa looked dead inside. You're all impossible. I hate all of you. Except for Joke. Nakamura said, you love her. Izuku laughed even harder. So this is what having friends really felt like. Somehow when Joke teased, it didn't feel the same as when Kaken did it. It wasn't hurtful at all, it was just friends giving each other a hard time. It was nice. Dinner's ready. Inko looked to where her son was laughing on the floor with his friends. Even if she didn't want him to be a hero, she thought she could deal with it if it meant he had friends like these. Thanks, Mom. Izuku led his friends back to the kitchen and they all sat down. Thanks for the food, Midoriya-san. Fukukado said as they dug in. Yeah, this tastes amazing. Nakamura added. Inko smiled. It's really the least I could do. And besides, we have to celebrate my baby boy getting into his dream school. She leveled a serious look at Aizawa. I trust you'll take care of him and make sure he stays safe. Aizawa nodded solemnly. Of course, Midoriya-san, I would never send Deku into a situation he wasn't prepared for. When we take him along on internships, we'll always be with him to protect him if things get dangerous. Deku may be smarter than most pros, but is still a student, and he'll be treated accordingly. Good, Inko sighed. I'll hold you to that, Aizawa-san. So Eraser, I guess you can't expel your whole class this semester, Brave smiled, because that would mean expelling Deku too. You expelled a whole class. Inko was wide-eyed. Aizawa put down his fork. I only expel kids who have no potential. It's cruel to let them continue when they'll only end up getting themselves or others killed. I won't expel Deku because he has potential. I wouldn't have recommended him otherwise. I find it hard to believe that an entire class was completely devoid of potential, Izuku insisted. They must have had strong quirks. You're living proof that quirks aren't everything, Aizawa said. They might have had strong quirks, but their personalities convinced me they didn't have what it takes. Spoiled brats, every single one of them. No one had ever told them no and let them get away with murder just because of their quirks. That's not how you raise a hero. Heroes have to be willing to protect people and give their all, not just coast by or be the best. Izuku couldn't help but think of Kaken. Everyone praised him no matter what he did simply because his quirk was perfect for heroics. But Eraser couldn't be talking about people like Kaken, could he? After all, Kaken would be an amazing hero. Most teachers aren't as strict on expulsions as Eraser here, Midoriya-san. Fukukado explained, I teach at another hero school and I probably expel maybe one student a year. Sometimes I don't expel any at all, it all depends on the class. But then again, Ketsubatsu isn't as competitive as UA. Oh, that's good I guess. One of Izuku's oldest friends is going to be applying to UA as well, and I wouldn't want to have to deal with Mitsuki if her son gets expelled. Don't worry about Kaken, Mom. I'm sure he won't have any problem getting in, and I know he'll be the best hero. 𝐭𝐽 smiled. You're right. It's silly to worry. Who knows, maybe you two will be in the same class. Aizawa hoped he was imagining the tension that came into Deku's shoulders at that. Maybe, no matter what, you'll probably make some of the best friends you've ever had in hero school, Nakamura said. I know I did. Maybe you'll find someone you have instant chemistry with, like me and Eraser. Fukukado said while Aizawa rolled his eyes. Oh, are you together? 𝐭𝐽 asked, how did you two meet? We're not, Aizawa started, but Fukukado interrupted him. Our agencies were nearby when we were first starting out. In between missions and drama, a mutual love blossomed. No it didn't, Aizawa muttered. Nakamura and Izuku snickered. That sounds so romantic. 𝐭𝐽 sighed. We aren't dating, Midoriya-san. Aizawa said. Not yet, Fukukado said, but don't worry, Midoriya-san, I'll win him over eventually. A mischievous glint came into 𝐭𝐽's eye as she looked between the two and Aizawa gulped. It's all right, Fukukado-san, I understand completely, 𝐭𝐽 said. Did you know that I had known Izuku's father for almost a year by the time he realized I was flirting with him? Mom! Izuku cried out in betrayal. Fukukado just laughed. Well, at least we've passed that stage of the courtship. I doubt Eraser could ignore my flirting. Neither can anyone else, that's the problem. Aizawa said. Oh, so you want me to be more subtle in my affections? I can do that. Aizawa just sighed as everyone laughed at him. Deku, don't encourage her. Why not? Izuku said innocently, you two are so cute together. This made Nakamura spit out his drink as Aizawa looked betrayed. I trusted you, Deku. I trusted you and you stabbed me in the back and left me with her. That was amazing, Deku. Fukukado held out her hand for a fist bump, which Izuku took her up on. And don't be so dramatic, Eraser. I'll win you over eventually and you know it. Aizawa just sighed and shook his head. More like you'll wear me down. Your way of flirting is like a war of attrition. He turned to look at Izuku as he pointedly changed the subject. So Deku, we need to talk about internship options. Don't internships happen after school starts? 𝐭𝐽 asked. Normally, yes. Your son, however, is a special case. He's been working with us in an advisory role for several months at this point, and there is a raid coming up that we invited him on before knowing how young he is. We still think that his input will be essential, but he'll need to be part of an official internship in order to come. 𝐭𝐽 looked worried. We will make sure he stays safe while still allowing him to contribute to the mission. Internships for first years normally only last a week, and we've been arguing non-stop about who gets to take you. Fukukado said, one of the options we've thought of is having you do a few different internships in the next 2 months leading up to the raid. That way, you'd get more intensive training to make sure you're ready and we can all stop fighting. Izuku's eyes went wide. That sounds amazing. Can I, Mom? Please. 𝐭𝐽 looked at him for a long moment before caving. You're sure that these internships will help him be safe? The three heroes nodded. Then okay, but don't put yourself in any more danger than you need to and listen to the heroes, okay? Okay. He hugged her tightly. Thank you so much, Mom. Thanks for dinner, Midoriya-san. Congratulations, Deku. Fukukado said as the heroes left. See you for training and internships. And don't forget there's a planning meeting Saturday, Nakamura said. Detective 𝐒𝐭𝐴 will be picking you up. I still don't understand why I can't just walk, Izuku said sullenly. It's because you're still a kid. Aizawa ruffled Izuku's hair. Problem child. So, Deku, you ready for your first internship? Izuku nodded as Ms. Joke led the way into the agency she shared with several other underground pros. He couldn't believe he was actually going to be staying the week, learning how to be a hero. Yeah, he knew he'd made it into UA, but this just felt more real, somehow. Okay, we'll drop your bag off in your room, then our support department wants to meet you. Support department. Like the people who make your weapons. 𝐤𝐸 nodded. That's part of what they do, but there's more too. The support department of a hero agency provides us with costumes, gear, and weapons, but they also do analysis, help us track down villains, and gather evidence to turn in to the police. Basically, kind of what you've been doing so far. That's why they're so eager to meet you. Oh, okay. 𝐤𝐸 led him up several floors to where they had several small rooms for internship purposes and let him drop off all his stuff before going to another floor and leading him down a long hallway to a dark room filled with various monitors and a team of people Izuku had never seen before. Hey everyone. Hey 𝐤𝐸. Who's the kid? Oh, him. 𝐤𝐸 smiled and pulled him out from where he had been trying to hide behind her. This is Deku. Izuku gave a hesitant wave as the team stared at him. That's Deku. I heard Deku was young, it's just. He's tiny. Izuku shrunk in on himself as the whispers continued. Of course, even Deku was cooler than him. He shouldn't have come. Maybe it wasn't too late to tell 𝐤𝐸 he wanted to go home. He felt 𝐤𝐸 put a hand on his shoulder and he looked up at her. She was smiling. Why don't you go show him what you got? She said softly. Hey, you got any videos Deku here can analyze? One of the support team pulled up a video from earlier that day and pressed play before Izuku could even get out his notebook. A bullet quirk. But why are the bullets ricocheting like that? They seem to be breaking the laws of physics. Maybe a telekinesis quirk. Is that her quirk or does she have a partner? She doesn't look betrayed when she's arrested, so probably no partner then. Most likely she brings along a limited number of bullets, then pretends to have a bullet quirk so people are more wary of her. Still, the speeds she's able to move them are really impressive. Wow. Izuku stopped and tried to stomp down his embarrassment at being caught muttering, it really is Deku. What? Did 𝐻𝐸 think I'd lie to 𝐻𝐸? 𝐤𝐸 laughed. I mean, you do have a tendency to pull pranks, so, that's fair. But I'm telling 𝐻𝐸, the kid's the real deal. Nearly gave us all a heart attack the first time we saw him though. We were expecting some grey beard, then in walks a baby. The team laughed and Izuku joined in. He really should be used to people being surprised at his age by now, but he still couldn't figure out why. His analysis really wasn't that spectacular, they were just being nice. So, Deku's here on an internship and he's not cleared for combat yet, but I'd like him to have an earpiece so I can talk to him during patrols. One of the support team members nodded and fiddled with something for a minute before handing it to Izuku. That's a standard 𝐻𝐸𝐽 earpiece, plus some. It will allow you to talk to the rest of the team, mostly just 𝐤𝐸 and then probably one of us, and it will allow us to see your location at all times. Izuku put it in his ear and smiled at 𝐤𝐸, who laughed and put an arm around his shoulder. Looking good, kid. You're all official now. So Deku, someone asked. I have to ask, when and how did you get started on analysis? Who taught you? Well, Izuku replied, I first started when I was about 4. He was about to say he thought it would help make up for his quirklessness, but he wasn't quite ready to have all that out in the open yet. I thought it might help me become a hero. I had my heart set on it even back then. I guess it worked. That made everyone laugh. To answer your other question, no one taught me. I just watched the news and started making notes on what I saw. He shrugged. I don't even want to look back at my first one. I've still got it, but I'm fairly certain I wrote at least half of it in crayon. There was complete silence and Izuku turned to see every member of the support team staring at him with open mouths, while 𝐤𝐸 simply smiled proudly. What happened? Did he say something wrong? Oh my goodness. One of them grabbed a notebook and pen that had been sitting on the desk. I need your autograph. I don't care that you're going to be an underground hero, that's amazing. Oh okay. Izuku looked up at 𝐤𝐸, who nodded, then took the paper. Do I sign as Deku or my real name? You go by Deku professionally, so I'd probably use that one. 𝐤𝐸 said, I sign everything as Ms. 𝐤𝐸 because no one knows who emi Fukukado is. She laughed. Izuku smiled. I did. You don't count. She ruffled his hair as he signed the notebook and gave it back. "I'd actually like to ask you guys a few questions while we're here," he said. The head of the support team nodded. "That's what we're here for." "Shoot." "So about Ms. Joke's laugh mask, did you design it or did a support firm? Does it work by focusing her quirk like present MIC's directional speaker, or does it completely neutralize the quirk? If it doesn't, can it? How do you?" They stayed for another hour or so while Izuku asked dozens of questions and the support team asked a few of their own. Ms. Joke just smiled proudly the whole time. She was thrilled to have gotten Deku first for internships, but the other heroes couldn't argue. She had called dibs, after all. Deku just looked so happy. In moments like this, it was hard to remember that no one had ever encouraged him, that he curled in on himself to make himself a smaller target, or that he stuttered and flinched whenever he realized he'd been rambling. By the time they left the support room, Izuku had filled up half a notebook. In his arms, he held the earpiece as well as a plain black jumpsuit they'd given him. He didn't have a hero costume yet, so he'd just have to make do with that until he figured out what he wanted. Izuku didn't even know what he wanted for his hero costume. All his old designs had been heavily inspired by All Might, but that was too painful now, and besides, he wasn't going to be a hero like All Might. "Ms. Joke," he asked hesitantly, "how did you decide on your hero costume?" Joke hummed and brought a finger to her chin as she thought, "Well, it wasn't simple, and my first costume looked almost nothing like this. At first, I thought I wanted something like a clown, but I just couldn't get it to work. Honestly, I don't know exactly what started me on the pirate motif. I just kinda stumbled on the stripes and it kinda grew from there. Besides that, some of it's functional, like I didn't start with a bandana, but my hair kept falling in my face during spars in hero training. Same with my gloves. I didn't think I'd ever use brass knuckles, but the support department at my school suggested them and I found that they really gave me an edge, especially since I had boxing training." She shrugged. "I guess you just start with something that sounds cool, then it grows from there as you get more experience and figure out what you need." "Why? You thinking about what you want?" Izuku nodded. "I had some ideas when I was a kid, but my goals are different now. I don't need to be flashy, I just want to make people feel safe, except for the villains," Ms. Joke teased. "Except for the villains." Izuku agreed. He hummed, "I wonder. Would it be better to have an intimidating costume to scare villains, or something cuter to comfort victims?" "Well, for underground heroes, it's often better to scare the villains. You won't be doing as much rescue work as heroes like the Pussycats or 13, but that doesn't mean you can completely ignore how the victims see you, either. I don't mean to say your costume has to be cute. Heroes like Deadshot can be comforting to civilians while still looking cool." She shrugged. "I don't know what to tell you, kid. You kind of have to find a balance. What's going to look intimidating to villains while comforting civilians?" Izuku thought for a moment. "If I had to say, I'd almost want to say epic." Joke laughed. "Well, when you figure out how to transfer that into visuals, let me know." Izuku smiled. "Yeah, epic seemed like a good start. / all right." Ms. Joke put her hands on her hips and looked Izuku in the eye. "Here are the rules. Interns are allowed to tag along on patrols, but you have to do what I tell you to, okay?" Izuku nodded. "Rule number 1 is no combat. We'll probably run into a few villains tonight, but I'm the one who'll be fighting them. You'll be staying on the rooftops or in the shadows, analyzing the situation and making observations but not fighting, are we clear?" Izuku nodded, but hesitated. "What if you're in trouble and need help?" "Then you run and contact the support team. They'll send another pro to assist me, but you stay away." She sighed. "I know it sounds harsh, but even if you don't have a quirk, you could still get in trouble if you step in. The only times you're allowed to fight are if your life is in danger or I give you XPLCT permission in an emergency. Even if it weren't the law, your mom would kill me if you got hurt." She laughed. "And then Eraser would find some way to bring me back from the dead just so he could kill me again. But joking aside, do you understand?" "Yes. If you are in trouble, another pro will be much more help than I would be and I won't have to worry about getting hurt or in trouble." He pouted. "Doesn't mean I have to like it." Joke laughed again and ruffled his hair. "Don't worry, kiddo, you'll have your license soon enough." Izuku looked up at her. "So what other rules are there?" Joke's eyes lit up with mischief. "Keep up. With that she ran up the nearest fire escape and onto the rooftops while 𝐒𝐻𝐼 scrambled to catch up. No fair. Ms. Joke was taking care of her third mugging of the night when it happened. 𝐒𝐻𝐼 was staying up on the rooftops like he'd been told, muttering a live analysis of the fight into his earpiece when he sensed someone coming up behind him. It was only years of dodging 𝐭𝐽𝐻 and months of combat training with Eraserhead that allowed him to move out of the way as a spiked fist came crashing down. Some hero brat. You're pretty creepy with your muttering, you know. The villain backed 𝐒𝐻𝐼 against the wall and swung his fist back. Deku! Ms. Joke cried, but the muggers on the street below came at her and wouldn't let her leave. 𝐒𝐻𝐼 flinched, knowing that the punch would hurt, maybe even worse than 𝐭𝐽𝐻's. When he opened his eyes again, he was staring at the ceiling. He brought a hand up to his face, expecting BLD and pain, but to his surprise he was fine. What happened? Hey there, handsome, what were you doing up here in the middle of the night? Midnight. He said in shock, did you knock out that guy? The heroine nodded, sorry it knocked you out too, but unfortunately my quirk just kinda goes everywhere. But that brings us back to what you're doing on a rooftop in the middle of the night. Kiddo. Are you okay? Did he hurt you? I am so sorry. Ms. Joke climbed up onto the rooftop, having finally knocked out all the villains she'd been fighting. She was nearly frantic with worry when she finally saw Deku and Midnight. It's okay, Ms. Joke. Midnight saved me just in time. Oh, thank goodness. She turned to Midnight, thank you so much. I told him to stay on the rooftops while I fought the villains so that he'd be safe. I wasn't expecting a villain to attack him. I don't know what I would have done if he'd gotten hurt, it's really no problem, I only regret that I had to knock him out too. Midnight looked between the two and her eyes widened. Joke, you didn't tell me you had a son. 𝐒𝐻𝐼 turned red as Joke sputtered for a moment. He's not. Then she got a hold of herself and started laughing. He's not my son. He's my intern. Why do you think he was my son? Well, Midnight replied, you both have green hair. His is quite a bit darker than yours, but if the father's hair was black, like say, Eraserhead's, Joke turned red and smacked Midnight in the arm. Shut up, you tease. Ah, but teasing is so exciting. Midnight purred, but aren't you going to introduce me to this strapping young hero? Joke put her arm around 𝐒𝐻𝐼's shoulders, of course. Midnight, this is Deku, my intern for this week. Deku, this is the R-rated hero Midnight. Deku. Midnight was shocked, like the Analyst. 𝐒𝐻𝐼 nodded, it's nice to finally meet you in person, Midnight. Did you catch the BLD villain from the last analysis I sent you? Midnight shook her head, you said the villain was probably a woman, so I handed the case off to Vlad King since my quirk wouldn't work as well. She squealed, you're Deku. Oh, you're so cute. I know, he's adorable right? Joke said. Adorable doesn't even cut it. I don't think I've ever seen anyone so small and cute. I'm right here, 𝐒𝐻𝐼 grumbled. All right, Joke held up her hands in surrender, we'll stop. She paused, but you are adorable. 𝐒𝐻𝐼 groaned and Midnight laughed, well then, I'll let you get back to your patrol. Actually, I think we're gonna head home. That was enough excitement for one night, thank you very much. Joke said, thanks again for saving him. You're welcome. Midnight waved to them as she left, see you at Deku. The two watched her leave before Deku couldn't contain himself anymore. That was Midnight. She's so cool and her quirk is super useful. She uses her theme well too, even if it was controversial when she first came on the scene. Ms. Joke smiled and shook her head as Deku rambled the whole way back. Come on, kiddo, we're gonna be late. Ms. Joke called behind her as 𝐒𝐻𝐼 scrambled to catch up. If you want me to keep up, maybe you could take some of my bags. Joke just laughed, but grabbed the duffel bag from 𝐒𝐻𝐼's outstretched hand. To celebrate the end of 𝐒𝐻𝐼's first preschool internship, they were going to dinner with Eraserhead, Mr. Brave, and even Sir Night Eye. 𝐒𝐻𝐼 was having trouble wrapping his head around the fact that the heroes wanted to hang out with him. They seemed to genuinely enjoy his company, which was strange. Even before 𝐭𝐽𝐻 had gotten his quirk, hanging out with him had required a fair bit of posturing, walking on eggshells, and telling 𝐭𝐽𝐻 how amazing he was. Hanging out with the heroes wasn't like hanging around 𝐻𝐻𝐿. The heroes teased one another, but they didn't mean to hurt each other. They laughed, joked, and talked about each other's interests. The heroes had never cut off one of his mumble storms by telling him he was annoying or creepy, instead adding interesting insights and asking Izuku to speak up. The worst that had happened was the one time when they were in the middle of a meeting and they told him that they needed to move on, but that they'd like to hear his ideas later. On the one hand, Izuku was the happiest he'd ever been, but however much he tried to ignore it, fear was bubbling just beneath the surface. It won't last. They'll grow tired of you soon enough. They'll realize how weak you are and then they'll hate you just like everybody else. Izuku shook his head and followed Joke into the 24-hour diner they were meeting at. 𝐿𝐴ZR insisted they go there because of everyone's patrol schedules, but Izuku knew that he probably just wanted to avoid being around a lot of people. But it worked out with everyone's schedules, so they were going to dinner at 10 o'clock at night and then Ms. Joke would take Izuku back home and he'd spend a week with his mom before his next internship with Mr. Brave. They were apparently the last to arrive, since the others were already sitting in a corner booth. Mr. Brave was telling a joke to Sir Night-Eye, who was chuckling softly while 𝐿𝐴ZR brooded with a cup of coffee and a tired energy that was making the waitresses steer clear. When they saw them, Mr. Brave waved energetically and Sir Night-Eye simply nodded. 𝐿𝐴ZR didn't acknowledge them, but downed the rest of his coffee and looked slightly less broody than before. "Hey everyone," Joke said loudly as she pushed Izuku into the booth and slid in after him. "How was your week?" "The same as every week, Joke," 𝐿𝐴ZR grumbled. "You were the only one with anything interesting happening." Joke laughed loudly. "That's fair. I guess I am really spoiled. After all, I had Deku all week long," she bragged. Mr. Brave rolled his eyes. Yeah, we heard you the first dozen times." He turned to Izuku. "She's been bragging non-stop that she got the first internship, just because she called dibs." He rolled his eyes. "It's like she's forgotten that he's going to intern with all of us." He called the last part at Joke, who simply stuck her tongue out at him while Izuku giggled. "So how was the internship, problem child?" 𝐿𝐴ZR asked. Izuku beamed. "It was amazing. I got to watch Ms. Joke fight and see how she used her quirk to take down the villains. I even got to meet Midnight." 𝐿𝐴ZR gave Joke a look. "You took a 14-year-old to meet the R-rated heroine. She ran into us while on patrol, and besides she isn't that bad. They do let her teach at UA, don't they?" 𝐿𝐴ZR sighed and Izuku continued. "I got to hang out with the support department too. They were a lot of fun and they gave me a real hero commission piece too. You should have seen them when I told them he was Deku." Joke smiled proudly. They couldn't take their jaws off the floor after they saw his skills in person. One guy even asked him for an autograph. Izuku turned a bright red while the others laughed and 𝐿𝐴ZR patted his shoulder consolingly. "That's tough, kid. You're already famous enough to sign autographs and you're not even in high school yet." "I'm not famous," Izuku grumbled. "Only heroes really know I exist." Mr. Brave shrugged. "Maybe not, but among heroes, you've got quite the reputation. We're all waiting with bated breath the day that Deku becomes an official hero." Their food had arrived by that point, since the others had ordered for Joke and Izuku before they arrived, and they all started to eat. Night-Eye looked at Izuku. "That reminds me, why did you choose the name Deku as your hero name?" Izuku looked surprised. "Deku's going to be my hero name." The others just looked at him and 𝐿𝐴ZR sighed. "Yes, problem child. It's kinda too late to change it now, since you've made all your connections with the name Deku and everyone knows who you are." "That's how I got stuck with 𝐿𝐴ZR. I honestly didn't really care what I was called, so when we had to choose at the beginning of internships our first year, I just went with the first thing out of present MIC's mouth. Then I got a reputation during my internship and the name stuck. Sorry if you wanted something else, kid, but that's the way the world works." Izuku nodded. "I guess that makes sense, I just hadn't thought of it like that." "You definitely chose an interesting name," Night-Eye said. "It means useless, doesn't it?" "I thought it was like Dekiru," Joke said. I can do it. Because if anyone can do it, Deku can." Izuku blushed. "I thought it was supposed to be ironic," Brave spoke up, "like it's useless to resist or something like that." Izuku laughed. "Not really, I'd never thought of it like that." So, Eraserhead prompted, "Why did you choose the name Deku?" "It's what my bullies called me because I was quirkless." Izuku was busy taking a drink, and so was oblivious to the looks of shocked horror on his friends' faces. Brave was the first to speak up. "Deku is an insult." Izuku nodded. "My best friend gave me the nickname when we were 4 because it's an alternate reading of Izuku, and I was useless now because I didn't have a quirk. Pretty much everybody calls me that now, even the teachers." "We've been calling you by an insult all this time." Eraser said angrily, "Why didn't you say anything? Why did you tell us to call you that?" Izuku played with his food for a minute before responding. "The day you asked if I had a code name was a really bad day. I'm usually okay at ignoring all the voices that say I'm not good enough, but," he shrugged, "at the time, I thought you guys deserved to know exactly who you were working with, that I was just a worthless Deku who would never be of any use to anyone." The heroes stared at him for a moment. It had never crossed their minds that Deku was using the name literally. They had never thought that maybe Deku called himself that because that's what he thought. Eraser wanted to find everyone who had ever hurt him and make them undergo the same psychological torture that Deku had been subjected to for years. "We can change it," Joke said. The others nodded. "It would take a lot of work, and normally I'd say it's more trouble than it's worth, but if it's an insult, yeah," Mr. Brave added, "you shouldn't have to go by such a hurtful nickname for the rest of your career." Izuku shook his head. "Thanks guys, but really, it's okay." He sipped his drink thoughtfully. "I don't think I mind it as much anymore. At first, it was really hurtful, but people have been calling me Deku since I was 4 and I've gotten used to it." "You shouldn't have to be used to it," Eraser said angrily. "We've been insulting you for months." Izuku looked at him in confusion. "But it's not an insult when you guys say it." They stared at him for a moment and he sighed. "You guys don't say Deku like it's an insult. I can't explain it, but it's something in your tone of voice when you talk to me. To you guys, it's just a name. I know that you guys respect me, so I don't feel useless when you say it, I feel." He hesitated. "Appreciated. I feel like you guys have taken something I hated for years and turned it on its head so that it means something completely different than it was meant to be. It makes me feel powerful to know that I've taken even my old insults and made them my own. Does that make any sense?" There was a long moment of silence before Izuku yelped as Joke enveloped him in a hug. Brave and Night Eye didn't hesitate, standing up and moving around the table to hug him as well. "Get in here, Eraser." Joke glared at him and Izuku started laughing and crying at the same time. Eraser just returned a glare of his own. "No. Just get in here and join the hug," Night Eye said. Eraser sighed heavily and rolled his eyes in defeat, but wrapped his arms around Izuku and the others. They stayed there for a few minutes until Izuku managed to stop crying. Could anyone blame him, though? Izuku beamed and wrapped his arms tighter around the heroes he was proud to call his friends. Izuku groaned as Mr. Brave used his hair like a WHP to flip him onto his back. "Again. Ooh. This just isn't working." Izuku stared up at the ceiling piteously. "I'm pretty good at hand-to-hand combat if I can get in close, but your quirk allows you to keep me at a distance. The way you can use your hair as a weapon even when it's detached means I can never get close to your actual body. The only way I could plausibly defeat you would be to completely destroy all your hair and then attack you, but I'd be exhausted long before that'd be a possibility." He rolled over and propped himself up on his elbows. "What do you think I should do, Brave?" Mr. Brave ran his hand through his hair. Well, I haven't ever run into that problem because my quirk is good for both ranged and close combat, but maybe it's time you start learning weapons." Izuku's eyes widened. "Really?" Brave shrugged. "I don't see any reason why not. You were gonna have to learn how to use weapons and support items eventually anyway because you don't have a quirk, so we may as well start now. Let's talk to the support department, see what they've got lying around for you to try." Izuku failed miserably as he tried not to be overwhelmed as he stared at the buffet of weapons on the table. There were quarterstaffs, tonfas, knives, swords, guns, grappling hooks, grenades, and some things that Izuku couldn't tell what they were for the life of him. "Now you'll probably want something for ranged combat and something for close combat," Mr. Brave said. 𝐒𝐿 nodded, like how Eraser has his capture weapon to keep people with mutant quirks at a distance, but also has a knife if he needs it. I mean, I think he mostly uses his knife to cut his capture weapon if it gets caught, Mr. Brave said thoughtfully, but you've got the right idea. The goal is just to be safe and to make sure you have options for every situation. It'd probably also be good for you to learn how to use things like flash grenades and smoke bombs as well so that you can run away from fights you're not ready for, especially while you're on your internships. He looked at 𝐒𝐿. So Deku, are you ready to try some of these babies out? No. 𝐒𝐿 shook his head and sighed, but I want to do it anyway. Brave laughed, that's the spirit. What do you want to try first? 𝐒𝐿 awkwardly picked up the quarterstaff and gave it a few experimental twirls. Nice pick. Brave yanked a few strands of hair from the back of his head and grew, twisted and hardened them until he was holding a black quarterstaff about the same size as the one 𝐒𝐿 had chosen. 𝐒𝐿 stared wide-eyed at the process. Do you know how to use it? Brave nodded, at least a little. Back when I was in school, I realized that I could use my hair to make basically any melee weapon I wanted, within reason, so I learned the basics of as many as I could. I prefer swords, myself, but, he shrugged, what can you do? Then he charged. 𝐒𝐿 tried to block Mr. Brave's attack, but ended up awkwardly fumbling his staff, tripping over it as he tried to retreat, then hitting himself on the head as he fell. Brave dropped his staff to hold his gut, laughing as 𝐒𝐿 glared at him, rubbing his sore head. Shut up. It's not as easy as it looks. I think I'm too short for a quarterstaff, anyway. Brave just held up a finger as he took a few minutes to compose himself. After a minute or so he sighed, okay, I'm done. But really, you can't expect to be amazing at a weapon the first time you hold it. Weapons mastery takes time, just like other skills, and it's always going to be painful at the beginning. That being said, you want to enjoy the feeling of the weapon you choose because otherwise you won't want to practice it and you'll never learn. 𝐒𝐿 sighed, I think I want to try something else if that's okay. Brave nodded and helped him up from the floor. They ended up spending the next few hours with 𝐒𝐿 trying all the weapons available with varying levels of success and Brave using his hair to make weapons of his own to fight back. By the time they were almost finished with the close combat weapon options, 𝐒𝐿 was frustrated, tired, and sore. Alright, Deku, this is the last one. Brave said, tired himself, knives. 𝐒� groaned tiredly but took the knife from the table. Brave made his own and taught 𝐒� how to hold it before stepping back. You ready? He waited for 𝐒� to nod before running at him. 𝐒� pivoted out of the way and slashed, using his dull blade to land a hit on Brave's arm right where he knew there was a ligament that would make it difficult for his opponent to use that arm if this was a real fight. He smiled at Brave, who used his distraction to knock him on his back again. That felt different, Brave observed, holding out a hand to help 𝐒� up. You liked that one, didn't you? 𝐒� nodded. I think knives will mesh well with the hand-to-hand I've learned from Eraser and will help me target the weak points I see in my analysis. I could have easily cut your hair with a strong enough knife or given you shallow cuts on your fingers to make it more difficult for you to pull out your hair. I'll have to be careful and study some anatomy so I know what cuts I can make without seriously injuring my opponent, but, he smiled brightly, I think I'm up to the challenge. That's my boy. Brave clapped 𝐒� heavily on the back, almost knocking him over. Okay, let's go on a short patrol. We can work on ranged weapons tomorrow, how does that sound? 𝐒� nodded and they both went to go change for patrol. The next day, 𝐒� and Mr. Brave were back in the training gym at his agency trying to choose a ranged weapon in case 𝐒� couldn't get close to his target. Midnight uses a WHP, right? Brave asked as 𝐒� picked one up. 𝐒� nodded, I think she chose it because it fits with her theme, but it would be useful to be able to grab opponents and bring them closer, although I think I'd prefer something like Eraser's capture weapon if that were my goal. He tried to crack the WHP, but just gave himself a welt on the cheek. Maybe I'll come back to this one if I don't find another weapon I like better, he said sheepishly. He ended up liking the bow and arrow decently well, but quickly realized that his hand-to-hand would suffer if he had to carry such a large weapon on his back. I think I'll leave that weapon to Native, he said as he gingerly placed it back on the table. What else have we got? Brave looked over his shoulder, It looks like we've got some blow darts and shurikens as well as some guns. What do you want to try? Izuku thought for a moment. Well, Snipe uses guns and he varies the kind of bullet he uses based on how much damage he wants to do. He mostly uses RBB bullets and bin bag rounds, but has also been known to use live ammo and tranq darts. Okay. We don't have a shooting range in this building, but the police station does and it's just a few blocks away. Is that alright? It didn't take them long to arrive, especially since Mr. Brave was in his civilian garb and not many people would have recognized him anyway, so they didn't have to worry about being stopped for autographs like a daylight hero would. Detective 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 was standing by the front desk when they arrived and he waved when he saw them. Hello Mr. Brave, Deku. How's the internship going? Izuku smiled. It's going really well, Detective. Mr. Brave thinks it's time I start learning weapons so I can make up for everything. Guns seem like a nice option if Deku can't get close to his opponent for any reason, Brave said. We were wondering if we could use the shooting range here, see if he likes them. 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 nodded. That'll be fine, you'll just need to sign some waivers and I'll take you right back. After they read through the required paperwork, 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 handed them both earmuffs and led them into the basement where a few officers were already practicing their marksmanship. 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 grabbed some paper targets from a bin by the door and sent one out about 3 meters to start, then handed Izuku a pistol. Okay, so the first rule of gun safety is to always treat a gun as if it's loaded, even when you know it's not. Basically, don't point the gun at someone unless you're actually ready to shoot them. Izuku nodded and 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 taught him how to load it and where to put his hands while Brave looked on proudly. Okay, now this little piece on the top is what's called a sight. You aim by lining it up with your target, which will become second nature the more you practice. Now Deku, just try to hit the bullseye. Izuku nodded and took a deep breath, trying to remember everything 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 had told him as he aimed, then pulled the trigger. He looked at the detective who nodded and gestured for him to fire again. Once he'd emptied his cartridge, 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 called back the target and Izuku smiled. None of the bullets had hit the bullseye, but none of them had completely missed the target either. Brave whistled and 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 smiled. That's a pretty nice grouping for your first time holding a gun. Would you like to try again? Izuku nodded enthusiastically and reloaded the gun as 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 changed the target. By the time they left 2 hours later, Izuku had gotten lucky and hit the bullseye twice and set up appointments to come practice twice a week. He massaged the soreness out of his hand as Brave gave the earmuffs back. Good work, Deku. 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 said, you'll need to have an official firearm certification before you're allowed to carry a gun in the field, but as long as you keep practicing, you should be able to get certified right before school starts in a few months. Either way, you should include the gun in your costume design and the support company will just add it when you're ready. Izuku nodded and followed Mr. Brave out the door. Thanks, Detective. Brave chucked as they left. Everybody's gonna be so jealous I got to teach you weapons. Group chat 12579. Eraserhead at 87657 you gave him a gun. 87657, Mr. Brave well. 12579. Eraserhead of all the irresponsible things you could have done this week, you gave him a gun. 87657, Mr. Brave calm down, Eraser, it's not like I let him keep it. I took him down to the police station shooting range and 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 was there the whole time. He's gonna help the kid get a certification so he doesn't shoot his eye out. He won't be able to carry it in the field for months, so stop being such a dad. 12579. Eraserhead I'm just concerned and I am not acting like a dad. 58726. Ms. Joke actually, you kinda are. 72598. Sir Knight I'm on Eraserhead's side. I support the idea of Deku having weapons, but are you sure it had to be a gun, Brave? 87657. Mr. Brave hey, we tried a bunch of different ones and Deku liked the gun best. He took to it like a duck to water too. It's not that different from the knives he chose for close combat. 12579. Eraserhead you gave him knives. 58726. Ms. Joke this just in, Eraserhead strives to baby-proof the hero industry to protect one small green bean. 12579. Eraserhead shut up, Joke. 58726. Ms. Joke not until you stop acting like a dad. 72598. Sir Knight as long as he learns how to use the weapon safely, I suppose it'll be alright. There are a lot of quirks that are more dangerous than guns. 12579, Eraserhead fine. You win. Deku's got a gun and I'm going back to bed. 58726, 𝐿 just wait. The kiddo will show up to class the first day with a gun strapped to his hip and Eraser'll have to choose between being a proud papa and a sour grumpus. 12579, Eraserhead, you do realize I'm still here, right? 58726, 𝐿 obviously. It's no fun to tease you when you're not here. 12579, Eraserhead, you're insufferable. 58726, 𝐿 but you love me. 12579, Eraserhead, I really don't. 87657, Mr. Brave, you too, stop flirting and go to bed. 87657 has left the chat. 72598 has left the chat. 58726, 𝐿, you heard the guy. Sleep well, Eraser. Remember, coffee doesn't count as sleep. 58726 has left the chat. 12579, Eraserhead, we won't. Whatever, good night. 12579 has left the chat. Katsuki Bakugo massaged out his wrists as he walked home from the UA entrance exam. He'd been pleasantly surprised that Deku hadn't shown up, but that didn't explain the changes he'd been seeing in the nerd the past few months. At first it was small, just Deku smiling more and always looking at his phone, as if the nerd had anyone to text. Annoying, but not a big deal at the end of the day. But then, about 2 or 3 months ago, Katsuki had stopped seeing the nerd outside of class at all. It wasn't like they hung out socially or anything, but Katsuki could usually find Deku during lunch or after school and give him a beatdown to make sure he still knew his place and wasn't still trying to be a hero. But lately, it was as if Deku had been disappearing into thin air whenever he didn't have to be in class. Once, Katsuki and his lackeys had followed him into an alleyway that he was certain didn't have any other exit, but the nerd was nowhere to be seen. The only sound or movement at all was some cat or something clamoring over the rooftops. And then school let out a month ago and he hadn't seen Deku since. It was really starting to piss him off. So when he saw a telltale sign of green hair turning the corner in front of him, Katsuki didn't hesitate to follow. Deku was listening to something on his phone and muttering to himself like the creep he was, so he didn't notice Katsuki gradually getting closer until he was grabbed by the collar and roughly pulled into an alley. Deku! He growled and shoved the nerd against the wall. 𝐒𝐻𝐿. Deku squeaked out, It's been a while. Katsuki scoffed, you've been avoiding me, nerd. You think you're better than me. He smiled slightly as Deku's eyes widened in fear. 𝐒𝐻𝐿, that's not it at all. I've just been really busy. As if a nobody like you has places to be. He slammed Deku against the wall again, wincing a little when he heard the nerd's head hit the brick. Admit it. You think you're too good to be around me. 𝐒𝐻𝐿, Deku slurred, but Katsuki wasn't listening. He threw a right hook at Deku's face, eyes widening as the nerd grabbed his arm and pivoted as if he was trying to throw Katsuki over his shoulder. Something went wrong at the last minute though, because Deku swayed a bit, then stumbled, allowing Katsuki to yank his arm free. Katsuki saw red. That DMN nerd. Was he really trying to fight back? After all the time Katsuki had spent teaching him his place. Who did he think he was? He grabbed Deku's shoulder with his left hand and set off a small explosion, causing him to cry out, but Katsuki wasn't done. He kept his hand on Deku's shoulder to keep him in place as he kneed him in the gut, then used his right to hit Deku in the jaw, which knocked him to the ground. Please, 𝐒𝐻𝐿, stop. It hurts. We're friends, please, stop. Katsuki snorted, friends? With a useless loser like you. He kicked him in the gut then let loose a few quirked punches that Deku tried to block with his arms. Who would be friends with you? As soon as he deemed that Deku had learned his lesson, Katsuki stood up straight and looked down at the cowering nerd. Pathetic. I'm glad you didn't show your worthless face at the entrance exam, Deku. He said, it seems you've finally learned your lesson about trying to be a hero. He gave one last kick, then turned to leave the alley. Don't make me teach you again. Izuku dragged himself to the training gym. He was meeting his friends at that afternoon, trying to ignore the nausea and the way his vision seemed to blur at the edges. They had all agreed to get together to see how he was coming along. With his training, especially now that he was starting to add weapons. He wanted nothing more than to go home and sleep for 1,000,000 years, but his discussion with Katsuki had already made him late. He couldn't disappoint his friends by not showing up at all. "Hey, Deku!" 𝐻𝐸 cried out cheerfully when she heard the door open. "What took you so long?" Deku tried to smile despite the pain in his cheek, but that soon turned into a frown when he saw the horrified looks on his friends' faces. Izuku knew he should know why they were so horrified, but his brain was too foggy to come up with anything. "EQ. Deku, can you hear me?" Eraserhead was kneeling in front of him and Izuku hissed as he touched the burn on his shoulder. Eraser yanked his hand away, but grabbed his other shoulder as Izuku started to sway. He was grateful for the support, since he felt like he was going to fall over any second. "Hi, Eraser," he tried to say, but it ended up coming out slurred and Izuku frowned in confusion. Why weren't words working the way they were supposed to? He didn't normally stutter around his friends. "Joke, hold him, make sure he stays awake, I'm calling Recovery Girl." Izuku brightened. "Recovery Girl is such a great hero," he slurred, "but I'm not that injured." "I've had worse." 𝐻𝐸 looked afraid. "Kiddo. Just ramble for me. What do you like about Recovery Girl's quirk?" Izuku nodded, but stopped when it felt like his head was about to split in two. He wanted to tell 𝐻𝐸 about how the healing energy coming from the person's own stamina allowed the heroine to heal for hours with hardly any breaks, but for some reason his tongue felt really heavy. He was really tired. "Ido, you've ta a or ku EQ." For all that 𝐸𝐸 tried to deny it when the others implied he saw Deku as a son, he didn't think he'd ever been more terrified than when the kid had stumbled in with a massive bruise on his cheek and dirty tear tracks running down his face. The way he'd hissed in pain when 𝐸𝐸 tried to steady him broke his heart and drew his attention to his singed t-shirt and the shiny burns running up and down his arms. It didn't take him long to realize that Deku had a pretty bad concussion and needed medical treatment immediately. How had he even managed to walk here? The kid had to have a freakish pain tolerance, which didn't paint a pretty picture. He called Ms. 𝐻𝐸 over to steady Deku and keep him awake while he called Recovery Girl. He was trying to explain the situation when he heard 𝐻𝐸's panicked voice and he turned around just in time to watch Deku pass out in 𝐻𝐸's arms. "That's it, we're taking him to UA now." "Sir Knight," I nodded, "you steady him and make sure we won't be worsening any injuries, I'll grab my car." "Hang in there, Deku. Please." 𝐸𝐸 whispered, "Please. We're gonna get you help." Izuku woke up blinking under harsh fluorescent lights. When he realized he didn't know where he was, he bolted upright, only to fall back on the bed when he was hit by a wave of nausea. "Don't try to sit up too fast, dearie." An old woman's voice said, "You had a bad concussion. I managed to heal most of it, but you still shouldn't move too quickly." Izuku obeyed the voice and moved more slowly. He felt the bed he was on raising up to help him and figured the owner of the voice must be controlling it. He turned to look at her. "Recovery Girl." She chuckled and nodded, gesturing for Izuku to look around the rest of the room. "Eraser. 𝐻𝐸. Brave. Night Eye. What are you all doing here?" He paused for a moment. "What am I doing here? And where is here anyway?" "You're at UA," Eraser said. "We brought you here because you had a concussion, multiple burns, as well as bruising on your face and stomach. You're honestly lucky you didn't have any internal bleeding." Izuku nodded along as he remembered the beating Kaken had given him. That sounded about right. He looked at his friends' faces and was hit by a wave of guilt as he realized he'd made them all worry. He shrank in on himself. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to bother you, and it was probably really inconvenient," and he looked up to find his 4 closest friends staring at him with so much concern he wanted to throw up and he started to hyperventilate. "Slow down, kid." Mr. Brave was suddenly kneeling at his side. "Breathe with me. In, out. Okay." After Izuku had managed to calm his breathing, he kept his eyes glued to the covers in embarrassment. He should have just gone home and hidden his injuries before meeting his friends so they wouldn't have to worry about them. Why didn't he do that? How could he have forgotten to do something so basic? "I would have been fine, guys. Maybe these injuries seem a little bad, but I've always managed pretty well in the past. You didn't need to take me to a doctor." Recovery Girl rapped him lightly on the head with her cane. Don't go saying things like that, dearie. Your injuries were severe and in other circumstances could have been life-threatening. Your friends did the right thing by bringing you here. Deku, Eraser spoke softly, as if expecting Izuku to run away if he spoke too loud. Who did this to you? Izuku stared down at his hands. It's not his fault. What do you mean, kiddo? It was strange hearing Ms. joke so quiet when normally her very presence was loud enough to take over a room. Izuku took a deep breath and hoped his friends wouldn't judge him. It was my fault. I shouldn't have gotten in his way. He was right, I was avoiding him, which I guess means he thought that I was thinking I was better than him, which I'm not, I know that. I'll never be better than him, but I guess that's how I was acting because that's what he thought, and so it's my fault because he had to teach me a lesson, and he's probably going to be super mad when he finds out that I still want to be a hero, and then, oh no. And then he's gonna do it again and it'll still be all my fault. 𝐿𝐴 felt his heart break. This kid. He'd just gotten beaten to a pulp, but instead of blaming the guilty party he was trying to justify it, searching for any tiny thing he'd done to deserve it. And the worst part was that people don't just start to do that overnight. The self-blame that Deku was exhibiting had to be the result of years of abuse, both emotional and physical. Who would do that to a kid? Deku, who did this? He watched as Deku continued playing with his hands rather than looking up. He didn't want to push the kid, but it was my friend. 𝐾𝐽𝐿. Deku said softly, then hurried on, but like I said, it wasn't his fault. It was mine for thinking I was better than him. Night Eye raised one eyebrow. First of all, did you actually think that? Deku's eyes widened and he flailed his arms. No. I would never. But he thinks I did, so I must have done something to make him think that, so it's my own fault. I shouldn't have gotten in his way, I should have just. Night Eye raised a hand to cut him off. If you didn't even do what he was accusing you of, how could it have been your fault? And even if you had thought you were better than him as you put it, it would still have been his fault for lashing out. Does that make any sense? Deku thought for a moment. Kinda. But he's my friend. He wouldn't hurt me if he didn't have a good reason. Sometimes, people don't have to have good reasons to hurt other people. Brave said hesitantly, and sometimes, they hurt others because it's what makes sense to them, but that doesn't make it right. It also doesn't make it your fault, Deku, Joke said. If this boy decided to hurt you, it's because he wanted to hurt you, not because of anything you did. But that doesn't make any sense. Deku sniffled as he started crying again. If he hurt me, it must be because I did something bad. We've been best friends since we were kids. Deku, Eraser looked him in the eye. Friends don't hurt each other. The room was silent for a long time as Deku digested that information. When he spoke again, his voice was fragile. You mean, Kaken's not really my friend? We're your friends, Deku. Joke said, we care about you and would never try to hurt you or teach you your place. Friends help each other, like when you help us with your analysis, or when we help you with your training. Friends tease each other and lift each other up, they don't put each other down or try to crush each other's dreams. Oh. Deku said quietly. I know it probably hurts to hear this, Night Eye said, but Kaken probably hasn't been your friend in a long time. Deku nodded absently. But that's okay. Brave said cheerfully, you've got us now. Deku gave a weak smile, but 𝐿𝐴 could tell he still didn't really believe them. Not that he could blame the kid. One positive conversation wasn't enough to override a lifetime of conditioning. He didn't know how long it would take before Deku realized what an extraordinary kid he was, but 𝐿𝐴 did know one thing. If he ever met this Kaken, that kid was getting a piece of his mind. Hey! I'm looking for Deku, is he here? 𝐿𝐴 looked at the young man suspiciously. Are you one of his friends? The young man smiled and 𝐿𝐴 was reminded of All Might. Yep. She hesitated. What's your hero name? He put both hands on his hips and struck his chest out. 𝐿𝐴. Why? 𝐿𝐴 gave a tense smile. Most of Izuku's friends are pro-heroes. Someone his own age. Let's just say kids have pretended to be his friends as pranks before. 𝐿𝐴 frowned. That 𝐿𝐴. 𝐿𝐴 nodded in agreement as Izuku came up behind her carrying his duffel bag. Thanks, Mom. He looked at the newcomer. You must be Mirio Togeto. Night Eyes in turn. The boy nodded. That's right. And you're Deku, right? I've heard a lot about you. Don't believe everything you hear, Izuku said blushing. Night Eye and the others tend to exaggerate. Togeto laughed. Sir told me you were too modest for your own good. Here, let me take that for you. He grabbed the duffel out of Izuku's hand. Have fun this week. Inko waved as the boys left. Be safe. We will, Mom. Izuku called back. Bye. She worries a lot, doesn't she? Tagata asked. Izuku nodded. Her heart's in the right place though. I know she doesn't really want me to be a hero, she's pretty bad at hiding it actually, but she's willing to support me even though it makes her worry. He shrugged. That's more than most people can say, so I count myself pretty lucky. He smiled. So what's it like being Night Eyes in turn? Togeto beamed. Super fun. But also really difficult. I didn't have a great handle on my quirk when I was recruited, but has put me through the ringer the last few months and now I'm one of the best students at UA. He rubbed the back of his neck. But actually, recently my quirk kind of mutated, and I'm basically having to MSTR it all over again. I was hoping you could help me with it this week, if that's okay. Izuku nodded. I'd love to. Analyzing quirks is really fun for me and I love coming up with ideas to help people improve. Your quirk is some kind of permeation, right? I remember you made a big splash at the sports festival. Togeto went slightly pink. Yeah. I really should have listened to Sensei when he suggested wearing a uniform infused with my DNA, but I thought that'd count as a costume or support item and give me an unfair advantage so, Izuku nodded. I understand where you're coming from, but that is a pretty big disadvantage. Togeto laughed again. Yeah, you get used to it. I hardly even get embarrassed anymore, except when I'm naked on national television, apparently. Izuku pulled out a small notebook as they got on the train. So, you said your quirk had mutated. What's it like now? Well, Togeto paused thoughtfully, like he was trying to be careful about what he said. It's gotten kind of a super strength aspect to it now. And some speed. But if I use it for more than a few punches at a time, I get hairline fractures in my bones. Izuku hummed thoughtfully. That's a pretty big mutation. It almost sounds like your quirk is too powerful for your body. Togeto chuckled awkwardly. Yeah, we thought it might be something like that. Izuku was already taking notes and jotting down different ideas. I think I'm gonna need to see your quirk in action before I can come up with anything concrete, but it's probably better if we wait until we're at Night Eye's agency before we do that. Public quirk usage and all that. Togeto nodded. So you're gonna be starting UA this year, right? Yep. Izuku practically bounced with excitement. It's seriously a dream come true. I've wanted to be a hero ever since I was a toddler. I just can't believe it's finally happening. Do you know what class you're going to be in? Izuku nodded. 1A. Normally, I'm not sure they'd put in a class where I was already friends with the teacher, but I think they knew Eraser would be okay with teaching. Someone like me. Togeto frowned in confusion. Someone like you. You mean someone who's already worked in the field? Izuku sighed. I mean someone quirkless. Togeto's jaw dropped. You're quirkless. Izuku fidgeted uncomfortably. Why'd he say that? Why'd he have to go and ruin it? And Togeto had been so nice too. Sorry dude, Togeto said, shaking his head. I'm not sure I'm worthy to be around someone as impressive as you. I for sure thought you had some kind of analysis quirk from what Sir told me about you. Has there ever been a quirkless hero before? Izuku stared at him. You mean, you don't think less of me because I don't have a quirk? You think it's cool? Togeto nodded. I guess you probably don't hear that a lot, do you? Izuku shook his head slowly. Well, you should. Togeto said, clapping him on the back. I was made fun of for my quirk too. Pretty much everyone told me it was too weak or had too many drawbacks. That there was no way I could be a hero. I almost believed them for a while. But then Sir took me under his wing and made me into who I am today. So, no, I'm not gonna judge you or tell you that you can't be a hero, because I can see you've got what it takes in here. He poked Izuku in the chest, then his eyes widened. Oh, no, you're crying. What happened? What did I do? Did I say something wrong? Izuku shook his head and wiped his eyes. "They're happy tears, I promise." "Sorry," he laughed, "I've always been kinda a crybaby." "No problem," 𝐒𝐿𝐴 said, "I think you're pretty cool." It wasn't long until they reached their stop and they walked the rest of the way to Sir Nai's agency, chatting about heroes who had recently debuted. They walked in the door and were greeted by a woman with blue skin. "Oh, you must Deku." Izuku nodded. "You're Bubble Girl. It's nice to meet you." Bubble Girl nodded. "Likewise. Sir asked me to show you where you'll be staying this week, then you'll be meeting him in his office. I think he has some cases he wants you to take a look at." "Oh," 𝐒𝐿𝐴 sighed, "I wanted Deku to help me with my quirk." "I'm sure there'll be time for that later, lemillion, but Sir takes first priority." "It's okay." 𝐒𝐿𝐴 smiled, "I'll just be practicing in the gym." He turned to Izuku. "Come find me when Sir's done with you." Izuku nodded as 𝐒𝐿𝐴 left and Bubble Girl led him to Night Eye's office. When he walked in, Night Eye was busy scribbling away at his desk, so Izuku took a moment to look around the room. He knew Night Eye used to be All Might's sidekick, but, wow, he was almost a bigger fanboy than Izuku used to be. He shifted uncomfortably under the #1 hero's gaze. Even through the posters, it felt like All Might was judging him. Izuku shook his head and turned his attention to the bookshelves instead. He had people who believed in him now. He was Deku, a highly respected analyst who had worked with more pros than many people would ever meet. All Might was just one more in the list of people who told him he couldn't, no different than Kaken or his teachers. He took a deep breath. "Sorry about that, Deku. I had to finish the paperwork from the case we closed yesterday." "The kidnapping case?" Night Eye nodded. "The leader had a paralyzation quirk, just like you thought. Bubble Girl said you had some other cases for me to look at." "Yes, but I don't just want you to analyze while you're here." Night Eye went over the cabinet and grabbed a handful of files. "I want you to observe how to handle a case from beginning to end. For example, we received a report yesterday of a museum robbery." He opened the paper-thin file in front of Izuku. "Here is the evidence we retrieved from the scene and will be collaborating with the police. What would you do first?" Izuku looked through the file, mostly a list of what was stolen, the damage done to the doors and display cases, and the data from the security cameras. The cameras were turned off. "Yes," Night Eye said, "but none of the cameras were broken." Izuku thought for a moment. "We're probably looking for someone with a jamming quirk or some sort of technology manipulation, so I'd ask the police to run a list of those, but there's also the possibility of someone simply hacking into the system, so they should run a list of known hackers as well. If it is a hacker, we should look at the system history because they might have left a trail. With a high-profile robbery like this, there's a strong probability that the culprit has committed smaller crimes in the past, so cross-reference the quirk and hacker lists with small robberies where the cameras were turned off within the past 5 years." He looked to Night Eye, who looked a little less stern than usual. "Good work. There are a few other possibilities that you could investigate, however." For the next few hours, Night Eye took Izuku through some of their current cases and educated him on the proper procedures for an investigation and how to work with the police to make sure all the evidence was catalogued and the villains were taken into custody. By the end, Izuku's brain hurt a little, but his cheeks also hurt from smiling too wide, so he figured it was all right. "Also, Deku, I think it would be a good idea for you to get a private investigator's license. It will be redundant once you receive your full hero's license, but I believe you would find it useful in the meantime." Izuku nodded. "I'll bring it up with Nedzu once school gets started, since I think he wants to have private lessons with me. I'm sure he's got some resources I can use to get it quickly." Night Eye nodded. "That's good. Just don't forget that the purpose of those lessons will be to learn, not to take over the world." "I'll keep that in mind." Izuku laughed. "If we're finished, I promised 𝐒𝐿𝐴 I'd help him with his quirk." Night Eye waved him away and grabbed a few more files to work on. "I don't often patrol like the other heroes you've interned with thus far, so I will simply see you tomorrow." Izuku smiled and left, closing the door behind him as he headed down toward where he thought the gym was. It took him a few minutes to find, since he took a wrong turn once and had to get directions from 𝐶𝐵𝐵𝐴, but soon enough he was peeking through the door to see if 𝐒𝐿𝐴 was still there. "You'll get it, young 𝐒𝐿𝐴, I know you will." Izuku hurriedly ducked back outside and held himself flat against the wall. What was All Might doing here? Didn't he have a falling out with Sir Night Eye years ago? And why was he in his skeletal form in front of 𝐿𝐿? Did he already run out of time today? Izuku could still hear the conversation filtering through the walls. I know, it's just so hard getting used to this much power. It's so different than my permeation. 𝐿𝐿 sighed, but I've asked Deku to help me out, so hopefully he'll help me work out some of the 𝐭𝐚𝐽. Deku. All Might sounded confused. Who's that? Izuku could practically hear 𝐿𝐿 smile. He's this super awesome quirk analyst that's been helping out in the underground for almost a year now. He doesn't interact with daylight heroes much, so I'm not surprised you haven't heard of him, but Sir talks about him all the time. Ah, All Might said, I suppose that makes sense. When are you supposed to meet him? Actually, I'm supposed to be meeting him right now. Well, as soon as Sir's done with him, but they should have finished by now. I told him to meet me here. He paused. Maybe I should go look for him, make sure he didn't get lost. Very well, young 𝐿𝐿. All Might said, I need to get to an appointment with Recover Girl, so I'll see you tomorrow. Izuku quickly ran around a corner so he wouldn't be seen and hopefully All Might would walk in the other direction. He almost sighed in relief when 𝐿𝐿 rounded the corner by himself. He really wasn't ready to face All Might today. Hey, Deku. 𝐿𝐿 said cheerfully, I was just looking for you. You didn't get lost, did you? Only a little, Izuku said shakily. Centipede helped me out. So, are you ready for me to see your quirk? Yeah. 𝐿𝐿 yelled and led Izuku into the thankfully empty gym. They made their way to the corner where a series of punching bags were set up. So, this is kind of what my quirk started as. 𝐿𝐿 passed a hand through one of the punching bags. I can turn my entire body intangible, but if I do that all at once, I'll just fall straight into the floor, which will spit me back out once I turn tangible again. While I'm intangible, I can't see, hear, or breathe because light, sound, and air just pass right through me. Izuku nodded and pulled out a notebook. Okay, so you said you've pretty much mastered this part of your quirk, right? You know how to work around the drawbacks. 𝐿𝐿 nodded. Okay, what about the mutation you mentioned? 𝐿𝐿 nodded and concentrated. His veins started glowing red with power and he passed his hand through the punching bag again, but this time without turning intangible. Izuku shielded his eyes from the flying sand and braced himself to stay on his feet despite the massive wind. So, yeah, 𝐿𝐿 said, that's the super strength aspect. I can do a few punches like that, but any more than 2 or 3 and my bones start breaking. It's just hairline fractures so far, but I don't want to get into a fight where my choices are to break my body or fail to save someone, you know. Izuku nodded, muttering quickly as his hand flew across the page. Okay, he said after about a minute, do you know yet if you're able to adjust your power output? 𝐿𝐿 shrugged, I've never tried before. Izuku put his notebook away. That's what we'll start with then. Try punching the next punching bag using your strength, but don't break through it. 3 punching bags later, and 𝐿𝐿 still hadn't managed to throw a punch without destroying anything. Izuku rubbed the bridge of his nose. Okay, I think we need a new approach. I noticed the last few times, the red veins only appear in the arm you're punching with. Is that where you're focusing your quirk? 𝐿𝐿 nodded. I'm used to only powering parts of my body at a time, since that's how I use my intangibility. Okay, well then this is probably going to be counterintuitive, but try using your quirk to power your entire body at the same time. Okay, 𝐿𝐿 said skeptically, but shifted into a battle stance. Within a few seconds, red veins had appeared all over his body, but they disappeared a few seconds later, only to be replaced by crackling white lightning. What the? 𝐿�'s eyes widened and he lost control of his quirk, the lightning fizzling out into nothing. What was that? Izuku was smiling widely. That was your quirk. Apparently, spreading out the power allows it to release more energy, almost in a static electricity kind of way. This slight release will probably also adjust to your capacity for your power and how much you're using. It'll be interesting to see once you learn to adjust your power output if the lightning disappears when you're using 100% and increases the lower you go, because that would indicate that your quirk can auto-regulate in order to not harm your body. That would be so cool. For the next hour, 𝐒𝐭𝐚𝐲 practiced spreading his quirk through his whole body until he could hold it for a full 5 minutes. He was sweating, but smiling, and Izuku felt like he had a pretty good concept of 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐲's quirk now. "Your quirk is so cool, 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐲," Izuku said when they decided to call it a day. "It's almost like it's two separate quirks." "Entirely." 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐲's eyes widened minutely and he laughed nervously. "I'm sure it's nothing that special, right?" Izuku raised an eyebrow, but brushed off 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐲's weird behavior when he didn't add anything. "See you tomorrow, Deku." Izuku smiled and watched 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐲 leave. "Yeah, CYA." Izuku couldn't sleep. The more he thought about 𝐒𝐭𝐴𝐲's quirk, the more it bugged him. According to everything he'd studied on quirk theory, it was theoretically possible to have an unrelated mutation appear later in life, but it was much more likely for a mutation to happen when the quirk first appeared in childhood. If 𝐒𝐴𝐴𝐲's quirk did mutate at his age, it should have just been a more powerful version of permeation or something similar to it, not super strength. The more likely scenario was that someone in 𝐒𝐴𝐴𝐲's family had a similar quirk and it just hid in his genes until now, but he'd said no one in his family had a strength quirk of any kind when Izuku had asked. So why had 𝐒𝐴𝐴𝐲's quirk mutated in such a weird way? Izuku sighed and swung his feet out of bed. If he wasn't going to be able to sleep anyway, he might as well use the time to research similar quirks and see if something like this had ever happened before. Even if he didn't find anything to satisfy his curiosity, he'd probably get some creative ideas on how to help 𝐒𝐴𝐴𝐲. The first half hour of searching didn't bring up anything too interesting. Most strength quirks functioned similarly to Death Arms's quirk, simply increasing strength and durability. They also all manifested in childhood, not as a mutation nearly a decade later. He was about to give up and try to go to sleep again when he noticed a promising article on a decades-old hero. Nana Shimura was just beginning her hero career when her quirk underwent a rare mutation, increasing her strength and speed exponentially. This was odd enough on its own, but even more so when taking into account that her quirk, float, had nothing to do with strength or speed. Izuku looked deeper into Shimura, analyzing her quirk float, which wasn't anything like permeation, and trying to figure out how hers mutated because maybe that'd tell him something about how Tagata's did. He found an old photo and almost screamed when he saw a younger All Might in his skinny form draping an arm around her. He read the article and ran his hands through his hair. Nana Shimura taught All Might. Now that he thought about it, 𝐒𝐴𝐴𝐲's quirk was eerily similar to All Might's and All Might seemed to be teaching him. It was probably that Night Eye reached after 𝐒𝐴𝐴𝐲's quirk mutated the way it did, because that would make sense. But what if it wasn't? Izuku almost didn't want to keep looking because he had to be wrong. What he was thinking just couldn't be possible. He numbly entered more search terms until he tracked down the hero who trained Nana Shimura. Manifested a strength aspect to his quirk in his second year at UA? No. It couldn't be. It wasn't possible. He looked at who had trained that hero. Took a 3-year break from hero work when her quirk unexpectedly mutated. If there had ever been any possibility that Izuku would get to sleep that night, it was long gone. He tracked the line of heroes and their mentors, each suddenly manifesting a strength quirk that inexplicitly got stronger with each hero mentored. When he finally got to the dawn of quirks and the trail went cold, Izuku let out a deep exhale. As impossible as it seemed, as ridiculous as it sounded, he couldn't deny it anymore. There was a quirk that could be passed on. Something was different about Deku. Mirio watched as Deku looked through case files with almost robotic precision and gave a few ideas for quirk improvement to him and Sir's sidekicks, but the quiet muttering and the bright smiles he'd come to associate with Deku were nowhere to be found. He also kept looking at Mirio oddly. Sometimes it was like he was sad. At other moments, it was almost as if he was angry. But then the looks were gone and Deku was back to being almost normal, except quieter. Mirio couldn't figure it out. Maybe Deku had a bad dream last night. Or maybe he just didn't sleep well. Whatever it was, it had to have been big, but at the same time. How big could it have been if he hadn't even left the agency? Mirio thought for a moment. He should probably ask him or something, right? All Might was always telling him how important a smile was to being the next symbol of peace. He said that taking care of people's spirits was just as important as taking care of their bodies, so Mirio looked at Deku for a minute before walking up to him and clapping him on the back. "Hey Deku, why so glum?" Deku jumped in surprise and looked at him nervously. "Sorry, I was lost in thought." "What did you say again?" "I was just noticing you're a bit off today," Mirio explained sheepishly. "Did something happen?" Deku's eyes widened slightly before he forced a wobbly smile onto his face. "I just didn't get much sleep last night is all." "Nightmares." "Research," Deku said. "Speaking of, I've got some cases I wanted to go over again. I'll see you later." Mirio watched in confusion as Deku practically ran down the hall. Well, that was weird. Izuku felt bad for avoiding 𝐿𝐴𝐵, but he couldn't help it. Every time he looked at him, all he could think was that 𝐿𝐴𝐵 had been born with an amazing quirk that would make him a wonderful hero and then decided that wasn't good enough and was literally given another. All while Izuku, who had been wanting to be a hero his entire life, had to deal with everyone telling him he was worthless and incapable of being a hero simply because he didn't have a quirk. He took a deep breath as he closed the door to his borrowed room. Why did 𝐿𝐴𝐵 get to have two quirks? In what way was that fair? Izuku thought back to that day on the rooftop when he asked All Might if he could be a hero too and had to quash down his anger before he screamed. All Might knew that there was a quirk that could be passed on, but still told a little boy that his dream of being a hero was absolutely impossible. Izuku didn't blame him for being reluctant to pass his quirk to a quirkless kid he'd just met, but did he have to give his quirk to someone who already had one? Why couldn't All Might have gone around talked with groups of quirkless kids and picked his successor that way? He could have seen which ones had heroic potential, which ones would be grateful for the opportunity he was giving them, and which would make good use of his amazing quirk. He even had his skinny form so no one would know that All Might was even looking for a successor. But instead, All Might had taken one look at 𝐿𝐴𝐵, who was already one of the best students at UA, and decided to make him even more powerful. It just wasn't fair. Izuku ran his hands through his hair, wincing when his fingers caught on the tangles. He knew he wasn't being fair to 𝐿𝐴𝐵. With how highly Night Eye thought of him, it was entirely possible it was Night Eye who reached out to All Might and suggested 𝐿𝐴𝐵 as a potential successor. It probably wasn't like 𝐿𝐴𝐵 asked to receive All Might's quirk. Izuku didn't know if he wished 𝐿𝐴𝐵 had rejected it or not. On the one hand, it would have been better to give someone quirkless that opportunity, but on the other, who could reject an offer like that from the #1 hero himself? Izuku sighed and got out his laptop. He was tired, angry, and frustrated, but all of that was drowned out by the self-pity that he felt as he compared himself, the scrawny kid doomed to misery the moment he was born with two toe joints, to 𝐿𝐴𝐵, the lucky hero with two amazing quirks. Could Izuku even be worth anything if he didn't even have one quirk? Group Chat 12857. Deku guys, this probably seems like a random question, but would you like me better if I had a quirk? 58726. Ms. Joke what's this about, Deku? 87657. Mr. Brave is 𝐿𝐴𝐵 giving you trouble again. 12857. Deku no, it's just. You guys are the first people I've ever met who don't judge me because I'm quirkless, and I appreciate that. But I can't help but think, if I had a quirk, wouldn't I be more useful? Wouldn't you like me better if I wasn't so useless? 58726. Ms. Joke you're not useless, Deku. I know you've been told all your life that quirkless and useless are synonymous, but they are not. You have so many useful skills that you've gained because you are smart and work hard, not because of anything you were born with. You don't need a quirk to be useful and you don't need a quirk for us to like you. 12579. Eraserhead I think what Joke's trying to say is that we would like you exactly the same whether you had a quirk or not. You are the same person with or without extra toe joints, so you don't need to worry that we'd like you better if you woke up tomorrow puking rainbows. 87657. Mr. Brave yeah, Deku, you're our friend because of who you are, your personality, and your amazing analysis. All of which would be the same even if you had a quirk, so to us at least, you'd be the same old Deku you are today. 12579. Eraserhead so, are we gonna talk about what brought this up? 12857. Deku it's really nothing, guys. I was just thinking about how hard my life's been and about how it'd be so much easier if I just had a quirk. Sorry to bother you guys. 12579. Eraserhead you're not bothering us, problem child. 58726, Ms. Joke, yeah, we're always here for you because we love you almost as much as Eraser loves me. 12579, Eraserhead joke. Izuku stopped chuckling when he heard a knock at his door. Deku. Nai's voice said, is it all right if I come in? Izuku hurriedly wiped away his tears. Yeah. Night Eye poked his head through the door. Anyone who didn't know him well would think his expression was stern, but Izuku could recognize the concern hidden behind the scowl. I saw the group chat. Izuku exhaled heavily. I forgot you could see that. Night Eye came and sat next to him on the bed. So, what's wrong? You don't normally struggle with your quirklessness. For a minute, Izuku considered lying. Considered saying something like that Kaken had reached out or he'd seen an anti-quirkless post or something. Or maybe he should tell the truth. Tell Night Eye he knew about All Might's quirk, assuming Night Eye knew about it, and that it was really unfair that 𝐂𝐴 gets 2 quirks while Izuku has to go without. Instead, he did neither of those things. I guess I'm just jealous, he said softly. Izuku knew All Might's quirk was supposed to be a secret and he didn't want to deal with the awkwardness if Night Eye and All Might knew he'd figured it out. 𝐂𝐴's quirk was already powerful before it mutated. A look of guilt flashed across Night Eye's face. So he did know. Cool. I always wanted a quirk so it would help me be a hero. I'm still going to try to be a hero without one, but it'd be so much easier if I just had a superpower, you know. Night Eye was silent for a long moment and Izuku was starting to regret ever speaking up. Of course Night Eye would probably feel guilty about recommending 𝐂𝐴 for All Might's quirk instead of Izuku. He should have thought of that. Stupid. What would you do, Night Eye said slowly, if you got a quirk? The way he phrased it meant it could be interpreted as what would he have done if he had gotten a quirk like he was supposed to, but Izuku knew what Night Eye was actually asking. Should I talk to All Might and 𝐂𝐴 and tell them I was wrong? Izuku shook his head slightly. It was 𝐂𝐴's quirk now and Izuku wasn't about to take that away from him, but what would Izuku have done if he had been offered All Might's quirk before 𝐂𝐴 had gotten it? Izuku's mind blanked at the idea. What would he have done? A year ago, he would have jumped at the opportunity, saying yes without any hesitation, all for the chance to be a hero. But what if he had? If All Might had offered him a quirk of his own, he never would have reached out to the hero underground. He never would have become Deku the Analyst. And he definitely wouldn't be on track to become the first quirkless hero. He would have used the quirk well, he knew that. He would have found creative ways to use it and he would have been able to save a lot of people, more than he'd probably save quirkless, but then, in 10 years, a little kid coming home from a devastating doctor's visit wouldn't be able to Google quirkless heroes and see someone like them with an actual license. That little kid would have to go through the same hell that Izuku went through going up, wanting to be a hero with no indication that it was even possible for someone like them. I don't think I want a quirk, Izuku said before he had a chance to overthink the whole thing. My life hasn't been easy, but it's not any different than what other quirkless kids face. I want to be able to give hope to people like me and prove that quirkless doesn't mean useless. I want little kids like me to have hope given to them, rather than have to stubbornly make their own like I did. Does that make sense? Night Eye smiled and nodded, looking relieved. You're a good kid, Deku. You're going to make an amazing hero. Izuku smiled and let out a breath. Now that that's settled, I have a few ideas on how to help 𝐂𝐴 improve his quirk. Inko Midoriya had insisted on having Eraserhead, Ms. Joke, Mr. Brave, and Sir Night Eye all over for dinner before the planned raid next week. 𝐿𝐼 didn't see the necessity of it, but she'd insisted she be able to spend time with the heroes who were responsible for bringing her son home alive and he hadn't been able to say no. It shouldn't be too painful, right? Oh dear, Midoriya-san said with a mischievous glint in her eye, I do believe I've forgotten a few key ingredients for the desert. Aizawa-san, Fukukada-san, would you mind running to the store and picking them up? Never mind. 𝐿𝐼 caught Deku smirking out of the corner of his eye and turned to glare at him, to which Deku responded by pasting an innocent look on his face, an effect which was totally ruined by the way his mouth twitched at the corners. Traitor. Of course, Midoriya-san. We'd love to. Fukukado said gleefully, Come on Eraser, let's go shopping like an old married couple. The sooner we leave, the sooner we can get back. 𝐿𝐴 said sullenly. Have fun you too. Nakamura was trying not to laugh, but was failing miserably. Even Sasaki was smiling. 𝐿𝐴 sighed, how was this his life? Deku gave them a list and 𝐿𝐴 rolled his eyes as they left. Yep, the problem child was definitely in on it. So Eraser, Fukukado grabbed his arm as she walked. Are you excited for your new class this year? 𝐿𝐴 hoped nobody mistook them for a couple, though he didn't think anyone would, if only because of their different fashion sense. He was wearing a black shirt and bright pink sweatpants while she was wearing a white and blue striped romper with flowing sleeves. He thought it looked rather good on her, but he wasn't going to say that out loud. Honestly, 𝐿𝐴 didn't know how she thought this relationship would work when they were obviously so different. A relationship with her would take him so far out of his comfort zone it wouldn't even be funny. I don't know. He stepped around a puddle. Most of them have powerful quirks, but you know that's no guarantee of success in the hero industry. She nodded. Yeah, I've had a lot of students over the years who think being a hero will be easy just because they can shoot fire or bend metal with their minds. If that was all it took to succeed as a hero, the licensing exam would have a much higher pass rate. She sighed. I may not be as trigger-happy with expulsions as you are, Eraser, but I do try to get in through my students' heads that heroism isn't just sunshine and rainbows like they've been taught to believe. That's why I always threaten expulsion on the first day. 𝐿𝐴 said. Even when I don't end up expelling anyone, that threat stays with them. Whenever they are tempted to think they already know what the hero industry is, they'll remember that the first day of hero school was nothing like they expected. Maybe it's because we're underground heroes. Fukukado jumped over a crack in the sidewalk and 𝐿𝐴 rolled his eyes. But I feel like we've got a unique perspective about what heroism is outside of fame and calling out special moves. It's dangerous and difficult and you can't save everyone. She frowned. Sometimes I wish the students understood that. As it is, it's always a shock the first time they encounter actual danger or watch someone die in front of them. It's something they have to experience to really understand, just telling them won't cut it. 𝐿𝐴 thought back to his friends, one of them dying on an internship before he ever had the chance to become a real hero. I didn't understand either. At first, Fukukado brought both hands up to her mouth. Oh, Eraser. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to. He shook his head. It's okay. It's a part of what made me the hero and teacher I am today. He thought for a moment. It's difficult, because I still miss him, but it's not like it's something I can't talk about. She looked at him softly. Still, I'm sorry for bringing up bad memories. Do you want to hear a joke instead? He glared at her as she grinned. What do you call a fake noodle? I really don't care. An imposter. Get it, Eraser? She laughed and grabbed his arm to pull him into the store they'd finally arrived at. 𝐿𝐴 sighed heavily, but turned away to hide a hint of a smile. Why did you even decide to go the underground route, anyway? With your loud personality, you could have easily been a daylight hero. Maybe you could have even had a side job as a comedian like MIC does as a radio host. It fits your quirk well enough. Fukukado looked up from the shopping list she'd been studying. I was always told I'd be a good comedian, but to me saving people was more important. I didn't want to be a hero to be famous, because if I was worrying about how to be famous, I wouldn't be worrying about how to be the best hero I can be. 𝐿𝐴 hadn't been expecting that answer. If anything, he'd been expecting her to make a joke about it and move on, not give him a genuine answer stemming in her beliefs about fame and heroism. Maybe they weren't so different after all. Me too. He said awkwardly. MIC always makes fun of me and says I chose to be underground because I hate the media, which is definitely true. He cut off Fukukado, who'd been about to tease him, but it was more because I didn't want to deal with having to constantly watch how I was portraying myself when all I really wanted to do was save people. Well, Eraser, Fukukado said as she punched him lightly in the arm, I think you're doing a pretty good job so far. Yeah, 𝐿𝐴 rolled his eyes. Now what were we supposed to buy? He couldn't help watching Fukukado as she found everything on the list. He hadn't known she was capable of taking things seriously. Her attitude had always made him think that everything was a joke to her, the same mindset that had made him expel many of his students, but here she was proving him wrong. She laughed, apparently, because she chose to, not because she didn't understand that people's lives were at stake every time she put on her hero costume. 𝐲𝐸 had known her for almost as long as he'd been a hero, but it was starting to seem like he really hadn't known her at all. 𝐲𝐸 wasn't quite sure how to feel about that. They've been gone for a while, Izuku said nervously. You don't think they ran into trouble, do you? Well, there's two options here, Nakamura said as he helped chop vegetables. Either 𝐸RAISER killed Joke and is now hiding the body, or he slammed the knife down on the table, making everyone jump. She killed him. I'd prefer if she killed him. The world needs all the laughter it can get, Sasaki sighed, but unfortunately I think the other possibility is much more likely. Oh, don't be so depressing, 𝐿𝐴NKO said. Maybe they realized they are both madly in love with each other and ran off to Tokyo to get married. And didn't invite us. Nakamura put his hand to his chest in mock betrayal. I thought I was going to be the best man. Izuku laughed. Yeah, right, you're more like the drunk uncle who gives an embarrassing toast. Shut up. Like you wouldn't be the ring bearer. Actually, 𝐿𝐴NKO said with a smile, I'm pretty sure he'd be the flower girl. Mom. Izuku yelped. Sasaki chuckled while Nakamura bent over in laughter and Izuku glared at them. Never mind. Everyone out. You're all corrupting my mother. Just then the door opened. Hey, what's everyone laughing about? Don't tell me I missed an awesome joke. Don't worry, Joke, Nakamura yelled. It was just my Doria-san laying out a sick burn. Fukukado had a pout on her face when she entered the kitchen. No fair. Aizawa entered, just as long as she's not burning dinner. Everyone stopped and stared at him for a moment before Fukukado's face split into a wide grin. I didn't know you had a sense of humor, 𝐸RAISER. He raised an eyebrow. If you didn't, then you've obviously never heard of my logical ruses. I think she meant a sense of humor that other people would find funny. Sasaki said blandly, causing everyone to burst out laughing again while Aizawa scowled. During dinner, 𝐿𝐴NKO quizzed each of the heroes on what they were going to do to keep Izuku safe. Izuku wanted to tell her she didn't have to worry. He was getting really good at combat and each of the heroes had constantly drilled into his head the importance of hanging back and observing so that he wasn't about to recklessly run into a fight. But at the same time, his mom was letting him do this, despite the fact that it was hard for her, so she deserved to know that he was going to be well protected. Once everyone had been stuffed to 𝐿𝐴NKO's satisfaction, Izuku grabbed his duffel bag from his room. They decided it was easier for him to just leave with Eraserhead for his final internship, considering it was officially starting tomorrow. 𝐿𝐴NKO stood by the door with tears in her eyes and scooped Izuku up into a big hug. Come home safe, okay? Her voice shook as she hugged him tighter. I love you. Izuku nodded and hugged her back as he started crying too. I'll be okay, Mom, I promise. I'll show those villains who's boss without doing anything stupid, okay? 𝐿𝐴NKO sniffed and looked at her son proudly. I'm glad you found what makes you happy, Izuku. She then turned to Aizawa. I'm trusting you to bring him home safe. Aizawa nodded solemnly. I care about your son and I would never let anything happen to him. Not if I can help it. Aizawa's eyes widened as 𝐿𝐴NKO launched forward and wrapped her arms around his waist. He looked helplessly to the other heroes, who were watching in amusement as he struggled to know what to do with his hands. Eventually he settled on lightly patting 𝐿𝐴NKO on the back. Okay, we should probably get going. 𝐿𝐴NKO pulled back with a shaky smile. Good luck. Izuku followed his friends out the door with a smile. He was finally going to be a hero. Do I have something for you? Izuku looked up from where he was looking over the analyses for the villains they would be fighting tomorrow night to see 𝐸RAISER standing in the doorway, holding a silver metal case. He walked over and set the case on the desk Izuku was working at. Normally we wouldn't give you this until after school started, 𝐸RAISER shrugged. But I think you'll agree that almost nothing about this situation is normal, so we rushed the order. Izuku looked between 𝐸RAISER and the case in confusion. 𝐸RAISER rolled his eyes and gestured for him to open it. Izuku hesitantly complied and sked in a breath when he saw what was inside. It was his hero costume. It consisted of a sleeveless dark green bodysuit with black panels running down the length of the suit on both sides and an open collar. It had knee-high dark red boots with black armored sections on the thighs and toes. The fingerless gloves went all the way up to just above his elbows. They were the same dark red as his boots, but the black armored sections were on his forearms so he could block attacks easier. They also had black knuckle dusters built in to give more power to Izuku's punches. The utility belt for his smoke bombs and flash grenades was black and red, while the knife holsters on his hips were all plain black. He had a holster on his right thigh that held a spring-loaded grappling hook similar to the one he'd borrowed from Yorozu during the entrance exam. There were empty holsters on each thigh and a green face mask with a black and red geometric pattern that made Izuku look at Eraser questioningly. "The extra holsters will be for your guns, once you're licensed," Eraser responded, "and the mask is sound-cancelling, with a mic on the inside. When you're wearing it, we'll be able to hear you through the comms, but anyone outside the comm system won't be able to. This way you can murmur as much as you need to without alerting enemies to your position. There's a button on the side that will turn that feature off in case you need to talk to civilians." Izuku nodded. "That's smart. I had a few problems with that on previous internships, so this'll be good." He looked at Eraser hopefully. "Can I put it on?" Eraser gave him a look. "I wouldn't have given it to you if you couldn't, problem child. You need to get used to the feel of it before the mission, anyway. Meet me in the gym when you're done and we'll spar." Izuku nodded and got dressed once Aizawa left. He took a minute to look at himself in the mirror and smiled behind the mask. He looked like a hero. 𝐿 hid a proud smile in his capture weapon when Deku walked into the gym in full costume. The kid really looked intimidating, decked out in dark colors with weapons strapped all over him, and 𝐿 felt a brief flash of pity for all the villains whose first meeting with him would be in a dark alley. Without any warning, 𝐿 grabbed his capture weapon and ran forward. Deku's eyes widened slightly as he brought his arms in front of him to block a kick, then grabbed the capture weapon and wrapped it around his forearm, using it to pull 𝐿 closer. He threw a punch at 𝐿's gut, but hadn't let go of the capture weapon, so 𝐿 dodged the punch and yanked hard, making Deku stumble and creating an opening for 𝐿 to throw him over his shoulder. "Good," 𝐿 said, "you're moving pretty well. Is the costume causing any problems or impeding your movements in any way?" Deku shook his head and waited for a moment, then his eyes widened and he pressed the button on the side of his mask. "I forget you couldn't hear me without comms." He laughed. "No, the extra weight on my feet and hands will take some getting used to, but nothing is chafing or digging anywhere, so I think that's good, right?" 𝐿 nodded. "All right, let's go again and get you used to the extra weight when you're fighting." They spent the next few hours sparring, and by the end of it, Deku was moving as easily in his costume as he could move without it and had gotten a feel for how to grab all his weapons. After that, they spent most of the rest of the day experimenting with the grappling hook so Deku wouldn't accidentally die if he had to use it. "This is going to be so cool to use in the middle of a fight, not just to get around." Deku rambled once they'd finished. "I could probably use it to fly at opponents and increase the speed and power of my punches and kicks. I wonder if there could be a way to control the velocity. I'll have to look at the design and maybe talk to the support department when I get to you. You can worry about incorporating the grappling hook into your fighting style after school starts," 𝐿 interrupted. "For tomorrow, just use it as a mobility aid." Deku nodded with determination, then looked up at 𝐿. "Thank you. By the way." 𝐿 raised his eyebrow. "For what?" "Making sure you don't die." Deku fiddled with his hands. "I mean, that too, but thank you for helping me be a hero. And for being my friend. I was pretty depressed before and then you guys reached out and basically rekindled my dream. Even if it was just that, it'd be more than enough, but then you guys actively took me under your wing and helped train me. Thanks." 𝐿 looked at Deku softly and ruffled his hair. "Go get dressed, problem child. You need to get a good night's sleep and I'm sure you're exhausted after today." Deku gave him a bright smile and he knew the kid had seen straight through his apathetic exterior. He watched Deku leave to go to the locker rooms and 𝐿 couldn't help but feel grateful that the problem child had weaseled his way into his life. Izuku's whole body was buzzing with nervous energy. The past few months had been beyond his wildest dreams. Okay, well, not really. His wildest dreams involved him spontaneously developing a quirk and going on to become the world's greatest hero, even better than Kaken, but those dreams were in the same vein as fantasy novels in that Izuku knew they were unrealistic and would never have the possibility of actually happening. Well, except if All Might had chosen him to receive his quirk apparently, but he was still kinda reeling from that discovery. Izuku shook his head. Reality was much better than his dreams anyway. He was on track to become the first quirkless hero. He'd gotten into UA, he'd learned to use weapons, he even had a hero costume. Everything was falling into place and Izuku was the happiest he'd been since the doctor had told him to give up on his dreams when he was 4 years old. But no matter how hard he tried, Izuku still couldn't help but feel like 𝐸𝐸𝐴 and the others would wake up one day and realize that he wasn't worth it. They kept telling him that he was skilled and would be an amazing hero, but they had to be wrong. Izuku was nothing, a nobody, just a pebble on the side of the road in someone else's story. All this luck and success was just setting him up for devastating disappointment when his heroes inevitably realized how useless he actually was. Izuku stilled as an even worse idea occurred to him. What if this was all just a practical joke? What if Kaken and the others had somehow impressed 𝐸𝐸𝐴 and the others and they were all laughing behind his back as they built up his dream only to take it away at the last minute? What if they were just pretending to be his friends even though they really hated him and were well aware of how useless he really was? He distantly realized that his brain was too tired to work correctly and was jumping to conclusions that wouldn't make any sense if he'd slept properly, but at the moment that was just a simple observation 2 steps removed from reality. The hypothetical betrayal felt all too real as tears began to leak from Izuku's eyes and soak the pillow as he struggled to breathe in the dark of his room. Why? Why would they do this to him? He really was worthless if he couldn't see through such an obvious ruse to begin with. Why did he ever think anyone would actually want to be friends with him? Izuku didn't notice that his sobs had gotten louder until someone came in his room and turned on the light. He shoved a hand over his mouth to try to contain the sound. He really was hopeless, wasn't he? Now he'd woken someone else up with his stupid crying and he was being such a bother, and why? Why was he so useless? He felt the bed dip as another person came and sat down beside him and a hand gently carded through his hair. Deku. 𝐸𝐸𝐴's voice was soft and full of concern, but Izuku couldn't help but wonder how much of that was faked. Hey kid, what's wrong? Izuku let out another sob and 𝐸𝐸𝐴 pulled him up and into a hug. Izuku clung to him on instinct as he started babbling incoherently and 𝐸𝐸𝐴 whispered comfort as he continued running a hand through his hair. No, we're not gonna leave you, kid. He said softly. We really do care about you. I don't know where you got the idea that this is all a joke or if that's even what you're saying, but it isn't. We would never do that to you. We would never betray you, Deku. Okay. Eventually, the reassurances managed to make their way into Izuku's anxiety-addled brain and his sobs gradually reduced themselves to sniffles. Now, with the lights on and 𝐸𝐸𝐴 beside him in ridiculous cat-printed pajamas, his thought process made a lot less sense. He giggled and 𝐸𝐸𝐴 raised one eyebrow. What's so funny, problem child? Izuku giggled again and gestured helplessly to 𝐸𝐸𝐴's pajamas. 𝐸𝐸𝐴 looked down at his outfit like he'd forgotten what he was wearing and sighed. If you tell joke about this, I will personally make sure they never find your body. They, Izuku hiccuped, somewhere between a laugh and a sob, they have kittens on them. 𝐸𝐸𝐴 rolled his eyes. Yes? They do. And unless you would like me to buy you a pair to match, I would advise you shut up about them. Izuku was full on laughing now. 𝐸𝐸𝐴, this big bad serious hero, sleeps in kitten pajamas. 𝐸𝐸𝐴 scoffed, I can have kitten pajamas if I want, problem child. Izuku stared at him with wide eyes. Do any of your friends know? 𝐸𝐸𝐴 glared at him. Again, if you tell anyone, Deku, they will never find your body. I have a reputation to maintain. Izuku smiled. That would be perfect merch. Imagine going to a hero convention and there's a booth just selling 𝐸𝐸𝐴 brand kitten pajamas. 𝐸𝐸𝐴 groaned and shook his head. That would be a nightmare. No. Never. That is not happening. He sighed and looked at Izuku. Are you feeling any better? Izuku stilled. He'd almost forgotten why 𝐸𝐸𝐴 was sitting on his bed in his ridiculous pajamas. After a long moment he nodded. I guess I don't know what came over me. I still feel like I don't deserve you guys sometimes. Well, Most of the time, actually. I guess it only makes when your brain isn't working quite right. 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser nodded. I get it. You've been told your whole life that no one would ever care about you except your mom, and that attitude isn't going to go away overnight. He leaned back so he could look Izuku in the eyes. But just know that we really are here for you. Not because we have to be, but because we genuinely like you. I know just words aren't enough, but I hope someday you'll be able to see how important you are to us, 𝐻𝐻𝐸deku. Izuku nodded. The anxious thoughts still clung to the back of his mind like a stubborn piece of sludge, but he could see past them now at least. He took a deep breath and smiled. Thanks, 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser. I think I'm okay now. I think we'd better try to sleep, though. Tomorrow's gonna be a long day. 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser nodded and ruffled Izuku's hair one last time before he stood up. Good night, Deku. Don't be afraid to wake me up if you need anything. Izuku nodded. All right, I'll let you know if I desperately need to take a picture of your pajamas to send to the group chat. 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser paused at the door and looked incredulously at Izuku, who was grinning widely. After a long moment he scoffed and rolled his eyes. Good night, problem child. He said fondly. Good night, 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser. Izuku buried himself deep in his blankets as 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser turned off the light and closed the door. He was asleep long before his anxiety could take over again. Izuku checked his weapons for what felt like the millionth time as he and 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser waited at the police station for the other heroes to arrive. While the raid wouldn't start for a few more hours, everyone was meeting here one last time to go over the plan and make sure everything was ready. The Darago drug cartel was one of the biggest suppliers of black market opioids in Japan, and there was a risk that if they didn't wipe it out all in one go, it would act like a hydra and grow back even stronger than before, so this was a much larger operation than most raids. The cartel had 5 main bases in Tokyo, so the heroes and police would be split into teams to raid each of them simultaneously. Most of the teams had only 2 or 3 heroes, depending on the size of the base, but the team assigned to the main base was much larger because that's where their leaders were. The police hadn't been able to find any information on the leaders and their quirks, just that they would be in the building tonight, so they needed Izuku to be on site to give a live analysis to the heroes. 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser was coming for much the same reason. It wouldn't matter what quirks the leaders have if they couldn't use them. Night Eye had been assigned to read the head villain's future to help make sure they weren't missing anything important, while Mr. Brave and Ms. Joke volunteered to go with them. Nobody had wanted to argue because they were both close to Deku and everyone knew how protective they could get. All in all, their entire little group had been assigned to the same base and Izuku was practically vibrating in nervousness and excitement. Are you okay? 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser tried to mask his concern behind a raised eyebrow. You haven't stopped moving since we arrived. Izuku forced himself to stop bouncing in place. I'm just a little nervous. I know I've been going on patrols with you guys for a while now, it's just. This is the first time I'm really going to be facing villains, you know. 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser glared at him. I do not know, considering that you have been ordered not to engage. Izuku waved his arms wildly. I know that. I'm not going to pick any fights, I swear. But I am going to be in close quarters with these villains and there's a chance they might come after me if things go south. He unbuttoned one of the pouches on his belt and refastened it almost immediately, just so he'd have something to do with his hands. I'm excited, but I'm also scared, you know. 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser's glare softened. I'd be concerned if you weren't. He sighed. The fact is that what we do is dangerous. It's worth it to protect people, but there is always the possibility that things will go wrong and we won't make it home. It's always difficult for students to learn that, especially ones who love the idea of being a hugely popular hero. The fact that you're scared is a good sign that you're prepared for what we're going to see in there. He looked away. I'm proud of you. Izuku's eyes widened. What? 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser scoffed, but smiled. You heard me the first time, problem child. If you're going to make me repeat myself, maybe you have less potential than I thought you did. He stiffened as Izuku flung himself forward and wrapped his arms around him. He'd awkwardly lifted a hand to pat the kid's hair when he heard a shutter click and looked up to see Ms. Joke and Mr. Brave standing in the doorway, grinning smugly. Ms. Joke thumbed through her phone. Oh, this is prime blackmail material right here. Izuku turned bright red as 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser jumped up and glared down. Joke, delete it. Ms. Joke, what 𝐻𝐻𝐸raiser? You don't want all your students knowing you're a giant softy as heart. She ran away from 𝐸𝐴𝐳 as Brave finally collapsed on the floor laughing. 𝐒𝐿 joined in, enjoying the last light-hearted moments before he would finally embark on his first real mission. Okay, remember, 𝐸𝐴𝐳 whispered, you are supposed to stay with at least one of us at all times. Don't go off on your own. 𝐒𝐿 nodded, I understand. Don't worry, 𝐸𝐴𝐳, between all four of you and my mother, no one is going to let me do anything reckless. 𝐸𝐴𝐳 narrowed his eyes, problem child. 𝐒𝐿 rolled his eyes and sighed, fine, I won't go off on my own, okay dad. 𝐂𝐻 had to practically suffocate herself to not give away their position with her laughter as 𝐸𝐴𝐳 turned a bright red and tried to hide his face completely in his capture weapon. 𝐒𝐿 smirked and high-fived Brave. All right, Night Eye cut in. You and 𝐂𝐻 will enter through the vents, 𝐸𝐴𝐳 and Brave will go through the front entrance, and I'll cover the back in case anyone tries to leave. Keep your radios on and alert everyone of any problems you run into. He looked at the others, who all nodded. Let's go. 𝐒𝐿 followed 𝐂𝐻 up the fire escape and onto the roof, crouching next to a vent that was large enough for them to crawl through. 𝐂𝐻 carefully unscrewed the cover and set it to the side, then got on her hands and knees and crawled in, 𝐒𝐿 following close behind. After a few feet, there was a vertical they had to go down, so 𝐒𝐿 grabbed his grappling hook and lodged it in the wall. 𝐂𝐻 grabbed onto his legs and lowered herself into the, pulling 𝐒𝐿 down along with her as he gradually let out the tension. When they landed, 𝐂𝐻 shuffled into a side tunnel to allow 𝐒𝐿 room to land, and he pressed a button on the side of his gear to release the hook from where it was lodged and retracted the line, then crawled after 𝐂𝐻. According to his mental map, they were getting close to the center of the building, which was where the leaders were likely to be. Through the radio, they heard grunts and curses as 𝐸𝐴𝐳 and Brave entered the building and started to take out the muscle. They followed a faint light and soon arrived at a large vent. 𝐂𝐻 looked through for a moment, then flattened herself against the side to allow 𝐒𝐿 to squeeze past just enough to see through the vent. The vent looked out over a large room with a large desk covered in cash and questionable substances. Behind the desk were two men and a woman, and the way they were surrounded by dozens of guards all looking toward the door made 𝐒𝐿 fairly confident that they were the leaders. Okay, I have eyes on the leaders, he said, thankful for the mask that cancelled his voice. There are 3 of them, but they are surrounded by about 24 thugs, so proceed with caution. 𝐂𝐻 started working on unscrewing the vent while Deku observed the people below. About half of the thugs have mutant quirks, but most of those are standing far away from the door, so they probably don't know that 𝐸𝐴𝐳 is here. Most of the rest were included on the list of members we already gathered. The 3 leaders are standing away from the door. One of them is tall red-haired man who looks pretty muscular, but not enough to make me think he has a strength quirk. The second one is also male, but he has a wolf mutant quirk, so most likely fights close combat and uses his teeth as weapons. Be careful of his sense of smell. The last one is a woman with a high black ponytail. She's short, but looks strong and doesn't have any physical manifestations of her quirk. Understood, 𝐸𝐴𝐳 grunted, we're almost at your location. I'll engage the villains now and try to take out some of the mutant quirks. 𝐂𝐻 said, that way they'll be distracted when you burst in. 𝐸𝐴𝐳 gave the okay and 𝐂𝐻 pushed the vent out. It fell to the ground with a large crash and all eyes turned to look as 𝐂𝐻 jumped down and started to fight the nearest villains. Laughter filled the air as she used her quirk to pick them off easily, and 𝐒� stayed in the shadows, muttering strategies and observations. The leaders were hanging back from the fight for now, but 𝐒� knew that probably wouldn't last long. All of a sudden, one of the villains slammed his hand into the wall, turning it to magma, and 𝐒� let out an undignified yelp as he fell into the room. He landed in a roll, but was right in the middle of the fight. Deku! 𝐂𝐻 yelled, and 𝐒� shifted into a battle stance and grabbed his knives. He had a lot more training than he had when he'd been attacked on his internship with 𝐂𝐻. A villain tried hitting him with a series of sparks from his hands, but 𝐒� dodged, then ran forward and slashed the man across his palms. He tried to let loose another stream of his quirk, but screamed as the sparks aggravated his injury. 𝐒� smiled slightly and used the butt of his knife to knock him out before moving on to his next opponent. You can't win this, you know that. A man said, and Izuku turned to see the red-haired leader slowly advancing on him. "You might as well give up now." Izuku was filled with despair. Of course they couldn't win. He was just a quirkless Deku and he was here with, what? 4 heroes. What did they think they could do against one of the biggest drag operations in Japan, especially when they all had such cool quirks? Before he knew what he was doing, Izuku had dropped the knife and held up his hands in surrender. Wait. Why was he surrendering? He shook himself and looked around to see 𝐂𝐴𝐳 was glaring down the red-haired villain, and it clicked. The red-haired villain has some kind of persuasion quirk. I think he can convince you of any lie he tells. He told me that we couldn't win and I didn't even think to disagree. Keep your quirk on him, 𝐂𝐴𝐳, I'm gonna knock him out. Deku. 𝐂𝐴𝐳 yelled, probably to tell him to not run toward the stupidly dangerous villain. He was probably right, but Izuku ignored him as he grabbed his other knife from its holster and swayed it into his right hand as he ran toward the villain, who was rambling, trying to convince him to give up. Izuku used his small size to his advantage and crouched to slash at the man's stomach. When he jumped back to dodge the knife, Izuku leveled a kick at his knees, making him stumble so that Izuku could reach his head and use the same trick he'd used earlier to knock the man out with the butt of his knife. Note to self, he muttered, add some kind of tranquilizer to the costume. Deku, are you okay? Brave yelled. He was currently fighting the wolf mutant leader, who had jumped in front of the woman leader, growling about how he needed to protect his boss. Yep, I'm just down a knife for now, he replied. A movement in his peripheral vision caught his eye and he saw the woman slipping out through the now destroyed side wall. Guys, the main leader is getting away, I'm gonna follow her. Deku. 𝐂𝐴𝐳 swore, knocking out his villain and chasing after the kid. Seriously, problem child. What did we specifically tell you not to do? The woman led him through a maze of hallways before suddenly turning around and facing him. Big mistake, hero. She jumped and bounced off the wall, coming around to kick Izuku in the kidneys. Some kind of elasticity quirk. He muttered as she continued bouncing around and hitting him, most likely not very good at fighting without it, considering how ingrained it is in her fighting style. Suddenly she started laughing. Nice of you to join us, 𝐂𝐴𝐳 ahead. Izuku looked behind him to see 𝐂𝐴𝐳 standing in the hall. However, you're out of luck. She stuck her bottom lip out in a fake pout. Too bad you can't erase my quirk without erasing your friends as well. Izuku's eyes lit up as 𝐂𝐴𝐳 gave a terrifying smile that was enough to make the woman retreat a few steps. Good thing my friend is quirkless, then, isn't it? The woman's eyes widened and she jumped, but immediately fell back to earth as 𝐂𝐴𝐳 activated his quirk. Izuku took advantage of her stumbling to run forward and throw her over his shoulder and she hit the cement with a cry. Undeterred, she jumped to her feet, but Izuku had been right that she wasn't used to fighting without her quirk. She would seemingly forget that she couldn't use it and try to jump around out of habit and would leave a wide opening for Izuku to take advantage of every time that happened. All of a sudden, she was wrapped in white fabric and her arms were pinned to her sides. Izuku gave one last kick so that she was lying on her side on the ground and couldn't get any purchase to get out of the bindings. 𝐂𝐴𝐳 used one hand to keep the tension on his weapon as he put in eye drops with the other. Good work, Deku. He glared down at him. Also, you're grounded. What? Izuku yelled incredulously. 𝐂𝐴𝐳 nodded. We told you not to run off on your own, and then you did. Hence, grounded. You're not my dad. Izuku said. You can't ground me. 𝐂𝐴𝐳 raised one eyebrow. I mean, if you'd prefer I can call your mother right now and give her a play-by-play of exactly what went down so she can ground you herself. Izuku waved his hands in front of him frantically. All right, I get it, I'm grounded. 𝐂𝐴𝐳 smirked and they both turned as Night Eye came strolling down the hall. The police have already arrested almost all villains on site. Which one is the leader? 𝐂𝐴𝐳 gave a nod toward the woman on the ground and Night Eye crouched in front of her. He touched her cheek, then cupped her chin roughly to force her to look at him. It appears our information was accurate. There does not seem to be any indication in the future that the cartel will recover. An officer came to retrieve the leader and wrap her in quirk suppressants before taking her outside to the fleet of waiting cop cars. Izuku and the other hero followed and met Joke and Brave outside along with Detective Tsukochi. "Thank you so much for your help, heroes." He smiled. "Especially you, Deku, we couldn't have done it without you. But that doesn't mean I approve of you running after a villain leader with zero warning, Deku," Eraser said sternly. "Oh, come on, Eraser." Joke laughed. "Don't pretend like you're not proud of the kid." Izuku smiled widely when Eraser sighed, but didn't deny the accusation. "Come on, problem child, it's time to go." Izuku stumbled after him. "What do we do now? Just go home." Eraser turned around quickly and gave a terrifying grin. "Now it's time for the absolute worst part of hero work." Izuku tilted his head in confusion and Eraser's smile grew. "Paperwork." Izuku gulped. Izuku took a deep breath before stepping through the front gates of UA. He was finally here. He hunched his shoulders slightly, trying to avoid as many other students as possible as he made his way to the main building. Maybe that nice girl Yorozu from the entrance exam would be in his class. Maybe Kacchan wouldn't be. Izuku shook his head. He shouldn't get his hopes up. As he climbed the front steps, he fiddled with the tie that he just hadn't managed to get right before coming to school today. Unfortunately, with his eyes busy looking at his neck, he didn't manage to see the last step. What a way to begin his first day at UA. Izuku tried to maneuver his momentum into a roll like Joke always told him to do if he was falling on a park hour run, but instead of the familiar feeling of a cement landing, he found himself turning over and over again in midair. "Oh, I am so sorry," a girl's voice said. "I was just trying to catch you using my quirk because I didn't think falling on the first day of school was a good omen. I'm so sorry, I've messed everything up." Izuku had now managed to right himself and was floating in midair, sitting cross-legged and smiling at the trippy feeling of hovering several feet above the ground. "You have some sort of anti-gravity quirk, right? That's so cool." She looked at him with wide eyes. "You don't mind?" Izuku shook his head. "I'm a little dizzy, but otherwise, this is fun. You have such an awesome quirk." The girl smiled and pressed her fingers together and Izuku felt his gravity suddenly return as he landed in a crouch. Must be some kind of 5-point contact quirk. "My name is Okiko Uraraka," she said as Izuku stood and brushed himself off. "What's your name?" "Izuku Midoriya." Izuku was thankful that being around Joke and her incessant flirting had somewhat desensitized him to talking to women, otherwise he would be a mess right now. Where are you headed? What class are you in?" Uraraka smiled. "Class 1A. I really only passed the exam by the skin of my teeth." "That 0-pointer was something else, wasn't it?" Izuku rubbed the back of his neck as they started walking. "Actually, I wouldn't know. I was admitted on recommendations, so our exams were a little different." "You guys fought robots, right?" Uraraka nodded. "Yep, it was insane. There were different sizes and strengths of robots, all worth different point values, but then there was this 0-point robot. You'd think it'd be tiny, right? Just something to trip over and get in the way, but it was the size of some of the buildings. I got trapped under some rubble and had already gone over my quirk's limits." She shuddered. "I managed to scrounge up just enough strength to use my quirk to escape and run away before it crushed me, but I ended up passing out for about 5 hours after the exam. The lecture recovery girl gave me was almost as scary as the 0-pointer." Izuku laughed. "Yeah, she can be pretty intimidating when people don't take care of themselves. I really never want to get on her bad side." They kept chatting idly as they tried to find the 1A classroom without getting lost. They got there a few minutes before the bell and Uraraka opened the giant door easily, probably using her quirk to help. She walked in without hesitation, but Izuku stood frozen by the door. "It's the first day and you're already scuffing up school property, you cretin. You're kidding me, right?" Kacchan smirked. "Did your old school put a stick up your butt or were you just born that way?" Ida sighed. "Let's start over. My name is Tenya Ida and I went to Sumi Private, Sumi, here." Kacchan leaned forward threateningly. "You must think you're better then. I'm gonna have fun putting you in your place." Izuku gulped. He knew exactly how terrible it was to have Kacchan have to put you in your place. He seriously felt bad for Ida. "Midoriya." Yorozu waved to him from where she was talking to the ice quirk user from the recommendation exam. It's so awesome you made it in. Did you end up having to take the normal exam as well? No, he didn't. Ida said. At least, I didn't see him there. Midoriya stood frozen from all the attention, but smiled hesitantly at Yorozu. No, I got in on my first try. It's good to see all of you again. What the F are you doing here, Deku? Kaken growled. Izuku flinched at Kaken's tone, but before he could respond, Ida was already speaking. Oh, you're the famous Deku-san. He bowed deeply. My brother Tensai speaks very highly of you. Tensai? Izuku tilted his head in confusion. He thought for a minute, did he know a Tensai that was related to Ida? A hero maybe. Wait, didn't he think Ida looked kinda like a pro at the entrance exam? What was the nickname he'd given him? Mini Ingenium. Oh, Ingenium. Izuku laughed. Yeah, he's fun to talk to. I tend to work more with his underground sidekicks than I do with him, though. Kaken's scowl deepened. Shouter's normal cup of morning coffee never seemed to be enough on the first day of school. Already, he'd had to stop 4 third-year students from pranking the first years, and had to deal with several students accusing him of being lost and wandering into UA on mistake. Yes, he knew he looked like a hobo, but come on. UA's security measures wouldn't allow a random homeless person to just walk in. He was almost at his classroom. Time to see how quickly this batch of newcomers would notice him. He was just about to grab his sleeping bag when he heard a series of small explosions coming from his class. What the F are you talking about, Deku? A loud voice screamed, and Shouter suddenly understood exactly what Deku had meant when he said he could just tell who was using his name as an insult. Why would actual pro heroes ever want to associate with a quirkless loser like you? Just who do you think you are? Please Bakugo. Such behavior is unbecoming of UA students. Shut up, Four Eyes. Please, Kaken. Deku said, just calm down. Shouter didn't wait for his students to notice him as he normally did on the first day of school. Instead, he slammed the door open with his quirk already activated and a glare strong enough to kill. Deku was hunching in on himself like he always did when he was feeling anxious, and a blonde boy was towering over him, hands still smoking from the use of his quirk only moments before. He was staring at his hands in confusion as the rest of the class looked on in shock. If this is how you think it is appropriate to treat your fellow students, Shouter said, then maybe you shouldn't be at UA at all. Deku looked up at him and shook his head frantically, pleading with his eyes for him not to expel the boy, Katsuki Bakugo, if Shouter remembered correctly from the class role he'd been given. Shouter grit his teeth. On the one hand, this kid was the reason that Deku would never truly realize how talented he was and had bullied him for at least a decade. On the other hand, if Shouter expelled the brat now, Deku would blame himself for his expulsion, which wouldn't be healthy. Shouter took a deep breath and released his quirk. He would give the brat until the end of the day. Hopefully by then Bakugo would have given him a concrete reason for expulsion and he could talk to Nezu. He'd still probably have to talk to Deku and try to prevent him from blaming himself, but that would be more doable if Shouter had a specific instance that day to point to. Everyone in your seats. This kind of behavior will not be tolerated, nor will wasting time. He strode to the front of the class. Rational students would understand that. Hey! Bakugo sneered, and just who the F are you? Shouter glared at him, but it was Deku who answered, this is Eraser. I mean, Eraserhead. He's our teacher. Shouter glanced at him softly, problem child, when we're at school, you can just call me Aizawa-sensei. He looked over at the rest of his students. For the rest of you who don't know me, my name is Shouter Aizawa, otherwise known as the pro hero Eraserhead. Deku knows me because we've worked together before. You'll probably find that's a pattern with him. Anyway, let's stop wasting time and just get to it. He pulled out his sleeping bag and retrieved a gym uniform from inside. The drama of that reveal had probably been lost since he didn't arrive to class bundled up, but oh well. Put these on and head outside. We'll start with a quirk assessment test. He then turned on his heel and walked out of the classroom and down the hall, not waiting for the students to catch up. Izuku shook his head and smiled as Aizawa explained that they couldn't waste time on pointless ceremonies. Classic Eraser. He resisted the urge to chuckle when he saw the other students' confused and terrified faces. They obviously hadn't seen the guy give a stray cat half a sandwich to lure it into his capture weapon so he could take it to the vet. Here at UA, we're not tethered to traditions. That means I get to run my class however I see fit. You've never gotten to use your quirks in physical exams before, that's just not rational. Bakugo, Izuku hoped he was imagining how his teacher's voice was laced with hatred. You got the most points on the entrance exam. What was your farthest distance throw with a softball in middle school? 67 meters. 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐿's eyes were lit with challenge. Try doing it with your quirk. Aizawa handed 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐿 an electric softball and motioned for him to stand in a circle that was painted on the field. Anything goes, just stay in the circle. 𝐒𝐻𝐻𝐿 smirked, all right, you asked for it. He wound up the ball, letting it loose with a scream and an explosion, die. Izuku's eyes widened. He'd known Kaken was powerful, but that was something else. All of you need to know your maximum capabilities, Aizawa drawled. His phone beeped as the ball landed and he showed the screen to the students, looking slightly disappointed. 705, 2 meters. It's the most rational way of figuring out your potential. Whoa! I want to go. A lively student with pink hair and skin exclaimed, that looks like fun. Yeah. Another boy said, we can use our quirks as much as we want. Fun. Aizawa said seriously, it's. Today you'll compete in 8 physical tests to gauge your potential. Whoever comes last has none and will be expelled immediately. The students gasped and Izuku covered his mouth with his hands to hide his smile. Aizawa was trying to scare them into doing their best and make sure they took the exercise seriously. If the last place could still prove they had potential, Aizawa wouldn't expel them, but they didn't know that. Izuku was tapped on the shoulder by an invisible hand and he looked over to see a floating uniform. Right. You knew Aizawa-sensei before. Is he really serious about this? Izuku carefully schooled his expression and shrugged. He has the highest expulsion rate of any teacher in the history of UA. He doesn't have any patience for students with zero potential. Yorozu looked at him oddly with one eyebrow raised. Apparently she'd caught on to the fact that he hadn't really answered the question. He smiled slightly and winked and she nodded and returned the smile. They both turned to look at Aizawa-sensei again. Wait a minute, Ribbit. A girl with green hair raised her hand. Bakugo implied earlier that Deku is quirkless. How is it fair to have all of us use our quirks when he won't be able to? Izuku curled in on himself. He'd hoped to keep his quirklesses a secret for a while longer. Now they were all going to think he didn't have any right to be in the hero course, especially if he managed to come in last on the assessment test. Aizawa only smiled. 𝐔𝐸𝐽, the invisible uniform stood up a little straighter. Is your quirk going to help you run faster? And no, Aizawa-sensei. He nodded. And Mineta, is your quirk going to help you throw a ball farther? A short boy with purple ball for hair shook his head. You'll all realize that while quirks are helpful and influence your potential, they are not everything and will not be useful for every situation. You have to train both your body and your mind to make up for that. I personally do not think that Deku will get last place even if the rest of you use your quirks, but that is neither here nor there. His strengths lie in his mind. Therefore, at the end, there will be a 9th test. Deku will try to create a strategy for you, as a class, to take me down. If this strategy works, he will be proven to have potential, even if he comes in last in the physical exams. In addition, if any of you do poorly in the physical exams, this strategy exercise will be your last chance to prove to me that it's no mistake that you're here. Understand? The students nodded and glanced at Izuku in pity, apparently already writing him off. There was no way that a group of students would be able to defeat a pro. Izuku simply ignored the stares. He wasn't planning on getting last in the physical tests. Aizawa wanted the students to go all out, so that was what he'd get. The students looked up at the list Aizawa had projected with the students' names, ranks, and scores in shock. Izuku had narrowly beat Mineta, even though he'd been able to use his quirk in at least the repeated sidestep. Mineta burst into tears, only stopping when Ojiro hit him over the head with his tail and reminded him about the strategy exercise. All right, Deku, do you have a good understanding of your classmates' quirks? Aizawa asked. When Izuku nodded, he turned to the rest of the class. I will go inside for 5 minutes, and when I return, you will try to take me down. He turned and walked away. Good luck. All eyes turned to look at Izuku, who smiled. Okay, so here's what I have in mind. Why should we listen to you, Deku? Bakugo stepped forward, explosions popping from his hands. You're just some quirkless nobody. Izuku took a deep breath. I may not have an awesome quirk like you do, Kaken, but, he screwed his eyes shut, that doesn't mean I'm useless. There was a long moment of silence before Bakugo huffed, whatever nerd. He turned away from the group. There's no way I'm taking orders from you. If any of you other extras know what's up, you'll refuse to follow this useless freak, but whatever. I'm out of here. Kaken went over and sat underneath one of the trees at the far end of the yard. Izuku's eyes lit up. Sitting where he was, Kaken would be the first thing Aizawa would see when he came out, which meant that he, whether he knew it or not, could serve as a distraction to make the rest of the plan work. Ida tossed a flare toward where Kachen was sitting, then turned to the rest of the group. That was uncalled for. Deku has quite the professional reputation, and he is far from useless. Although, he turned to Izuku, the fact that you are quirkless puts your performance during the entrance exam into an entirely different light. I must apologize again for my rudeness that day. It's not a big deal. Izuku waved his hands placatingly, then rubbed the back of his neck. You didn't know I was quirkless, and I try not to tell people if I can help it. Still, Ida pushed his glasses up his nose. It was very impressive. Dude, Kaminari interrupted, are you really a recommendation student even though you're quirkless? Izuku nodded. I had the good luck to get to know a few pro heroes in the last year. They recommended me because of my skills in analysis and strategy. Do you know why there are 3 of us in this class? Todoroki's expression was hard to read, but Izuku figured he was confused, since his position as a recommendation student wasn't exactly normal. Politics, he gave a small, nervous smile. Nezu figured there'd be a mutiny among the parents if a quirkless kid took one of the 4 normal recommendation spots, so he petitioned the school board to add an extra one this year. They officially approved it after seeing my performance in the exam. Not that this isn't interesting, Gyro said brusquely, but Aizawa-sensei is going to be coming back any minute. Oh, right. Izuku said, Gyro, you can hear really well, right? She nodded. Okay, go near the door and listen. Warn us when he's coming back. Gyro nodded and headed off. Koda, you communicate with animals, correct? Koda nodded nervously. Okay, could you get some birds to see where Aizawa-sensei is now? Go stand on the other side of the door as Gyro so that Aizawa can't see you both at the same time. That way, even if he cancels one of your quirks, the other will still have theirs and will be able to warn us when he comes. What about the rest of us, dude? Kirishima asked, and a few people took an involuntary step back at the wide grin that spread across Izuku's face. Here's the plan. As soon as the 5 minutes were up, Shouter headed back outside. It would be interesting to see what the problem child would come up with, and would be even more interesting to see if his other students were willing to put aside their biases and listen to him. This was as much a test of his other students to see if they could cooperate as it was a chance for Deku to prove himself, not that Shouter would ever tell them that. He walked out the doors with his quirk already activated, just in case they were planning a blitz attack, but there was no one there, just Bakugo sitting moodily under a tree. Shouter narrowed his eyes. Where were they? All of a sudden a few objects were thrown at his face from the tree line and exploded when they were just a foot from his face. Flash grenades. Yorozu must have made them. He closed his eyes as soon as he saw the light, then opened them as soon as he thought it was safe, only for them to start watering tearfully. Did the problem child seriously just use tear gas on him? As Shouter squinted around, he could slightly see Tokoyami's dark shadow spread out by the main building and could tell he was hiding other students, but couldn't tell who. All of a sudden, a patch of thin air pushed him over. Nice try, Hagekure, but he's a trained pro hero. It's going to take a lot more than that to take him down. He tried to regain his footing like he always did when someone tried to throw him off balance, only to find the ground beneath his feet slick with acid. He sighed, an inconvenience, but not something he'd never faced. All of a sudden, His muscles tensed as an electric shock coursed through him. CRP, acid was conductive. Where was Kaminari hiding? This would be so much easier if he just knew where to look to cancel out their quirks, but the students were all being careful to hide from him. A shower of small pebbles started pelting him from the tree line. He looked over in that direction and some of the pebbles slowed down and dropped to the ground as their gravity returned. As if that was a cue, Ojiro, Kirishima, Soto, and Shoji all rushed out from behind trees, equipped with sunglasses and gas masks, and started attacking him, trying to surround him so that he couldn't cancel all their quirks at once. Shouter smiled and readied his capture weapon to take them down, only to find it wouldn't move like it was supposed to. He looked down at it to find that Mineta had thrown his sticky ball all over it while Shouter was distracted by Uraraka's pebbles. He activated his quirk, which was getting painful since the tear gas hadn't dissipated yet, and the ball fell off. He turned back toward the close combat team as they reached him, only to be blinded again by Aimar's naval laser. Fine, even if he couldn't effectively use his quirk, he still had enough battle experience to combat his students based on their movements alone. The close combat team kept up a steady stream of attacks which combined with the laser and tear gas to disorient Shouter just enough that he didn't realize Zero's tape was reaching out toward his ankles until it was already wrapped around him. He was yanked off his feet and he saw Ida running with the other end of the tape as he slid down an ice path, apparently made so that he wouldn't get hurt by being dragged at super speeds across the rough grounds. Shouter slid to a stop at Deku's feet, who smiled down at him proudly as he stuck a foot on his chest. "Hey there, Eraser. Give up." He sighed heavily and nodded, his body going limp in surrender. "Good work, problem child, very impressive." He glared at Deku. "But did you have to use tear gas?" Deku rubbed the back of his neck nervously. "You're always saying to not be afraid to exploit any weakness in an opponent." His other students were all yelling and high-fiving each other as they gathered around their downed teacher. "That was awesome," Ashido yelled. "Yeah, super manly." Shouter extricated himself from the tape and stood, putting eye drops in. Yeah. Good work, brats. Don't let this go to your head, though. You'll never have a 20-on-1 fight in your hero careers." He stood up straighter, and now for the expulsions. The group went silent, with the exception of Mineta who started crying again as he stared up at Shouter with fear. Shouter gave a deranged smile. It was a logical ruse. Several students started crying along with Mineta, who had swayed to tears of relief as Deku practically fell over from laughter. Yorozu shrugged. "I thought that was obvious from the beginning." A bell rang in the school, signaling lunchtime, and his students practically ran toward the building. "Deku!" Shouter called out. Deku paused and looked up at him with wide, worried eyes, but Shouter just smiled softly. "You did good, problem child." Deku gave a smile so bright that it should be illegal. "Thanks, Eraser." "Whatever," he raised one eyebrow. "You'd better get going unless you want to miss lunch." "Oh, right." Izuku started to run to catch up with his classmates and waved over his shoulder. "See you later, Eraser." Shouter chuckled and shook his head, heading toward his office to get his super extra strength eye drops and rest his eyes for the next lesson. Izuku walked through the too-full cafeteria balancing his tray and trying to find an empty table, as had been his habit since he'd been diagnosed quirkless. Trying to sit with other people was just asking for trouble. Which was part of the reason he was so confused when Uraraka enthusiastically waved at him and motioned for him to come sit by her and Ida. He looked behind him, expecting to see Ashido or maybe Gyro behind him, but the only other person she could have been waving at was some kid with purple hair that Izuku didn't know. Judging by the slightly raised eyebrow the purple-haired kid was giving him, he didn't know Uraraka either. Which meant she was waving at Izuku. "Oh no." Izuku slowly went to go sit next to her, wondering if this was some kind of trick. It had to be, right? He was quirkless and Kaken had made sure everyone knew it, so why would anyone be nice to him? "Deku," Uraraka said cheerfully. "That was super cool how you came up with a plan to beat Aizawa-sensei. You're super smart." Izuku chuckled nervously, waiting for her to mock him, but she never did. Instead she turned to her food as if nothing else needed to be said. Izuku just looked at her in shock. What was happening? Yes. It was very impressive, although we did have to use some underhanded tricks to win. Ida frowned. However, it does appear that was the only way to win. Izuku nodded. Yeah, Eraser's hard to counter because he can cancel your quirks, so you kinda have to be willing to fight dirty if you're going to beat him. It's the same with some villains. He shrugged. I'm planning on being an underground hero, so fighting dirty is just kinda part of the package. Still, Ida said, I wish we didn't have to resort to such tricks. Oh, lighten up, Ida. We won, didn't we? And no one got expelled. Uraraka hit him softly on the shoulder and Ida looked like he didn't know whether this was normal or if he was supposed to scold. Ha for it. Yo. Deku. Kirishima clapped him on the back as he, Ashido, Zero, and Kaminari passed by on their way to another table. That was super manly how you beat Aizawa-sensei. We're looking forward to getting to know you better this year. Izuku blushed and looked at him with wide eyes. Oh okay. I really didn't do much, I mean, I left most of the fighting to you guys. Don't be so modest, dude. Kaminari laughed. Compared to a bunch of hopeless idiots like us, you're a regular genius. You're not. Zero cut Izuku off by laying a hand on his shoulder. It's okay. We have other strengths, but intelligence just isn't one of them and there's no use in denying that. Oh. Ashido smiled. Let's go sit next to Bakugo. He's trying to be all surly over by himself. Izuku genuinely hoped Kaken didn't explode them immediately. They were too nice to die young. Shortly after their group left, Gorozu caught Izuku's eye from across the cafeteria and headed over with her tray, dragging a blank-faced Todoroki behind her. Hey Midoriya, she said as they sat down. Or do you prefer to be called Deku? It seems to be what Aizawa-sensei and Bakugo both call you, and they seem to have known you the longest. Izuku shrugged. I don't really care at this point. Deku is the name I use for the analysis work I do for underground heroes, and it's going to be my hero name, so that's why Eraser calls me that. You can just call me whatever you want, I guess. I like Deku. Uraraka said. It has a you can do it vibe to it. Izuku laughed. You know, you're not the first person to tell me that. You already know your hero name. Ida said in surprise. Izuku nodded. As weird as it is to already have one, I already have a reputation, so it wouldn't make any sense to change it. I've even already been asked to give an autograph or two. He immediately slapped his hands over his mouth. Oh no. Why did he say that? They were going to think he was bragging and then they'd hate him and... The others were staring at him wide-eyed and then Uraraka started laughing. You're gonna go underground and you're already famous. Sign me up. The others, with the exception of Todoroki, joined in on the laughter. Izuku turned bright red and tried to splutter out some sort of excuse, but the others just ignored him. The lunch hour continued like that with Izuku gradually getting more comfortable around these friends. Was that what they were? Izuku didn't know. It still felt like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. They were going to walk together back to the classroom, but Izuku let the others go on ahead as he used the restroom. As he headed back, he spotted Aizawa off in a side hallway. Deku. Izuku was glad that Aizawa's eyes looked a little less red than they had. He still felt really bad for having Yorozu make tear gas during the exercise. How was lunch? It was great. Izuku grinned. Everyone's really nice. It's so different from middle school. Aizawa scowled but let it slide, which Izuku was grateful for. Instead, Aizawa just frowned at Izuku's tie. Problem child, what did you even do to make a piece of fabric look like that? Izuku smiled sheepishly. Well, my dad's not really around to teach me and mom never learned so. Let's just say that while you can learn anything on YouTube, some things are more difficult than others. Don't worry though, I'll get the hang of it. Aizawa just huffed and grabbed Izuku's tie, untying it and rettying it much neater while Izuku looked at him in shock. Problem child. He shook his head as he tucked the end of the tie under Izuku's blazer and squeezed his shoulder. Get to class. You wouldn't want to be late for your first official heroics lesson. Yes sir. Izuku said and Aizawa tilted his head like he did when he was trying to hide a smile. Izuku slipped into the room and went to his seat, unfortunately right behind Kaken. He still wasn't quite sure how to feel about him. Kaken had been his first friend, but ever since he'd made other friends, it had kinda tossed his whole perspective of their relationship on its head, especially since Aizawa and the others insisted that no one who treated him like Kaken did could really be his friend. Kaken glared at him as he passed, letting off a few intimidating pops of his quirk before huffing and turning to face forward as the bell rang. Izuku wondered who their heroics teacher would be. Probably one of the more combat-oriented teachers like Snipe or Ectoplasm. Oh, this year was going to be great. A loud bang sounded and everyone flinched as the door was slammed open. Izuku's eyes widened at the sight of their new heroics teacher, who was grinning at the class in all his muscled glory. "I am here." Katsuki scowled as he got dressed in his brand new hero costume. Many of the other boys were gawking at Deku's outfit, especially the variety of weapons strapped all over his body, including 2 pistols. How did he even get those? More importantly, how did a quirkless loser like him even get into UA? Yeah, he'd admit that the strategy he'd used to beat the teacher was somewhat impressive, but the nerd didn't even do any of the work. It was the people with quirks who did all the fighting, and that was how it'd always be. So where did the stupid teachers get off on letting a useless loser like Deku into the top hero school in the country? And getting in on recommendations? What kind of a joke was that? This was supposed to be his epic origin story, and Deku was ruining it on purpose. Whatever. Hopefully he'd have an excuse to beat the nerd up during battle training. If not, well, there'd always be after school. "You all look like heroes," All Might declared proudly as they all stepped out of the tunnel. Katsuki thought it was odd that Deku wasn't fanboying like everyone else in class. In fact, he almost seemed nervous, like he was trying to avoid looking All Might in the eye or something. Not that Katsuki cared, but it seemed way out of character. On the other hand, All Might's eyes kept lingering on Deku, like he knew he recognized him from somewhere, but couldn't quite place him or something. It was really sing Katsuki off. All Might explained that they'd be fighting indoor battles in teams of 2 and Katsuki tuned him out. Indoor battles, teams of 2, don't forget the bomb, got it. Now stop yammering, he wanted to fight already. He rolled his eyes when he was paired with the 4-eyed freak. What was that extra's quirk again? It couldn't have been anything too cool if he hung out with Deku at lunch. All Might pulled out the first 2 teams to fight with a flourish and Katsuki smirked. Looks like he'd get to PND Deku into the ground sooner rather than later. His smile widened as he saw Deku gulp and glance over at him with fear in his eyes, but fell when the nerd suddenly clenched his fists and turned to him with determination. Katsuki gave Deku his best glare before stalking off into the building with 4 eyes. This time, he'd make sure that loser learned his lesson. The fake weapon was in a room on the 3rd floor and didn't take long to find. Ida strode up to it and knocked on the side. The bomb made a hollow clanging sound. "So this is the weapon we're supposed to protect?" Katsuki scoffed and clenched his fists. He could care less about the stupid weapon. "Hey 4 eyes," he kept looking at the door. "Do you really think Deku deserves to be in the hero course? You saw how well he strategized," Ida said. "And he did get on recommendations, a feat which escaped even me, so I believe he has earned his spot in the hero course. Why do you seem so angry when it comes to him?" Katsuki saw red. That nerd was tricking him all these months. Pretending to give up on being a hero, pretending that he'd finally learned how useless he really was, when all along he was training with pro heroes. Why didn't those heroes take an interest in Katsuki? He would obviously be a better hero than Deku, everyone said so. So why did the loser get in on recommendations and get a cooler origin story than he did? Deku didn't even have a quirk. If there was anything that Katsuki was sure about in this exercise, it was that he was going to kill that DMN nerd. "Do you think they want us to memorize the floor plan?" Uraraka asked. Izuku shrugged. "I don't know, I already did anyway. It's helpful to have a mental map so you don't get lost." Uraraka stared at him with wide eyes before changing the subject. "You know, All Might's just as cool in person as he is on television. I'm glad he's not threatening to expel us like Aizawa did." Izuku sat silently for a minute, the paper in his hand becoming hopelessly wrinkled from how tightly he was gripping it. Between realizing that he'd have to deal with the hero that had tried to crush his dreams for the whole semester and being faced with Kaken who he knew would try to kill him, his nerves were shot. Suddenly, Izuku remembered that it was probably appropriate to say something when a girl asked you a question. Yeah. Sure. Uraraka looked at him with concern. Are you okay, Deku? You look kinda tense. Izuku sighed. It's just we're going up against Kachin. Plus Ida's pretty strong too. We should be on our guard, who knows what they'll pull. Oh right, Bakugo's the one who's always making fun of you. Izuku nodded. He can be a pain, but his strength, his confidence, his ambition, not to mention his quirk, they're all so much greater than mine. He's pretty mad that you're at UA, isn't he? Uraraka asked. Izuku gave a breathy laugh. Yep. That's why he's going to come after me as soon as All Might says go. It doesn't matter that the safer strategy would be for him to guard the bomb and send Ida out to find us. For him, this is personal and nothing anyone says is going to convince him otherwise. He stood. But that's why I have to do better. I refuse to lose today. Uraraka got a strange glint in her eye. So it's a fated battle between rivals, here. Not that I'm trying to get you wrapped up in my fight or anything. Izuku waved his arms in denial. Are you kidding? Uraraka laughed and hit a fist against her palm. Let's win this. All Might's voice came over the speaker, making them jump. Your time starts now. Immediately, Izuku snapped into analyst mode. Okay, so they're probably expecting us to come in through the front door. Can you use your quirk on yourself? Uraraka grimaced. Only as a last resort. It makes me really sick. Izuku nodded, then grabbed his grappling hook from its holster, shot it so that it lodged into the wall right above the fourth-story window, and handed it to Uraraka. Okay, so this button will retract it and this one will dislodge the hook from wherever it is. If you need to shoot it again, just aim and press this button right here. Got it. Uraraka looked overwhelmed, but nodded. Is it strong enough to handle both of us? Izuku looked up at the building. It doesn't need to be. I'll be going in through the front door and leading Kaken on a wild goose chase. You'll find Ida and the bomb. Get it if you can, but if not, just tell me where it is and I'll try to beat Kachin and come help you. Are you sure you can handle him on your own? Uraraka asked worriedly. Izuku smiled. Kaken may have bombs, he patted the holster on his thigh, but I have guns. Uraraka smiled and nodded before pressing the button to retract the hook and swinging through the open window, pulling the hook through behind her. Izuku waited a moment before walking in through the front door. He'd taken a lot of notes on indoor battles over the years, but even more so since he'd started working with underground heroes. He'd even done an indoor battle during the drag cartel raid, so the setting didn't scare him. His opponent, however, did. Suddenly, Kaken rounded a corner, aiming an explosion right at Izuku's face. He rolled out of the way, just in time, thankful for the fast reflexes he'd gotten from his specialized training. Thick smoke and dust filled the hallway and through his comm, he heard Uraraka quietly ask if he was okay. Kaken emerged from the smoke with a sneer on his face. What's the matter, Deku? If you're afraid to stand up and fight me, maybe a quirkless coward like you shouldn't be at UA. Izuku stood up tall and looked him in the eye. I knew you'd come at me first and try to take me by surprise. Kachin grinned. I don't want to hurt you so bad that they have to stop the fight, he yelled as he prepared to throw a quirk-loaded punch, but I want to come close. Izuku grabbed Kachin's arm and flipped him over his shoulder. You always use a big right hook to start a fight, Kachin. He breathed. I know because I've watched you for years. Maybe you should have paid more attention to that notebook you burned and threw away. Those analyses are what caught the attention of the heroes that recommended me. He grit his teeth as Kachin began to get up. You can call me Deku, but I'm not the same defenseless helpless kid anymore. From now on, Deku is the name of a hero. Kachin lowered himself into a battle stance. Deku, he growled, you're shaking in your boots just looking at me, but you want to fight me anyway. His hands started popping with explosions. That's why I hate you. Kaken launched himself at Izuku, who tried to wrap the capture tape around his ankle. Next, Izuku knew that Kaken would get impatient and try to end the fight with a big punch, which he dodged. Kaken was starting to mix up his moves, so did that mean he was worried? If he couldn't easily predict his moves, it wouldn't be smart to fight him in close range. Izuku turned and ran down the hall before the smoke cleared, trying to come up with a plan. He heard Bakugo scream in rage, "You've been laughing behind my back, Deku. Getting at all these heroes just make me look bad. You're just a quirkless nobody, Deku. You'll never beat me." Izuku knew that if he went and helped Uraraka now, Kaken would just follow him. So he had to take him down here. He'd taken down actual villains though, something Kaken hadn't ever done, so he knew he could do it, just as long as he didn't get too close to Kaken's hands. "Stop hiding, Deku." Izuku thought back to all the times he'd tried to assure Kaken that he wasn't trying to compete with him or be better than him, only to get bruises and burns for his troubles. His eyes lit up with determination. Maybe it was time to change his attitude. "Deku." Uraraka's voice came over the radio. "Ida knows I'm here, sorry. He's monologuing right now, though." Izuku nodded and gripped the capture tape. They were probably running low on time. It was time to stop messing around and beat Kaken. He heard footsteps behind him and turned around to see Kaken smiling at him as he slowly walked closer. "Since you're such a stalker, you probably already know that my quirk works by exploding my sweat, so just imagine what I could do if I had a lot of it." Izuku's eyes widened as Kaken slowly pulled the pin on his gauntlets. "That's right, these babies aren't just for show. Bakugo." All Might's voice came over the radio, "Don't do it. You'll kill him. He'll be fine as long as he dodges." Bakugo grinned widely and finished pulling the pin, letting loose a massive explosion. Come in, Midoriya." All Might was practically screaming through the radio and Izuku hissed in pain. He'd managed to roll behind a pillar just in time to dodge the explosion, but it had done nothing to shield him from the heat. He knew he probably had at least first-degree burns all over his body just from being too close to that blast. Who had approved that thing? He'd had to train for months to be able to carry a gun, and Bakugo just comes in with enough firepower to blow through the wall. Kaken had just tried to kill him. Something finally clicked in Izuku's brain and he remembered what Night Eye had said. He was right, Kaken. No, Katsuki hadn't been his friend in a long time. Izuku smiled as an idea occurred to him and he silently held himself closer to the pillar as he drew one of his guns from its holster. "These gauntlets are awesome." Katsuki cackled. "Even if you give it all you've got, you'll never beat me." Izuku waited for the smoke to clear, so he could aim properly. Katsuki would be expecting him to be curled on the ground in the fetal position. It would throw him for a loop when he was nowhere to be seen. "Hey!" Katsuki looked around, then ran over to the hole in the wall and looked down to see if Izuku had been thrown from the building in the explosion. Where'd you go?" 2 gunshots rang out clearly as Izuku fired, hitting Katsuki with a RBB bullet to each bicep, right where Tsukochi had taught him would cause enough pain to temporarily paralyze the arm. Katsuki's eyes widened as Izuku ran at him and swiped his legs out from under him, landing him flat on his back. Quickly Izuku took the capture tape and wrapped it around each of Katsuki's wrists before standing. "Bakugo has been captured by the hero team. You've always been amazing, Katsuki." Izuku looked down at Katsuki as his eyes widened at the lack of nickname. "That's why I had to beat you. I'm coming, Uraraka. Where are you?" "5th floor, hurry. Ida cleared the room of everything except the weapon, so I don't have any ammo for my quirk." Izuku turned and ran, making his way up the stairs as quickly as he could. He could hear Ida laughing evilly and monologuing. He opened his pocket and grabbed a small box of RBB bullets that he kept on him in case he had to reload. He tossed a smoke bomb inside the room to cover him as he ran toward Uraraka and shoved the box into her hands, then pulled out his gun and ducked behind another pillar. Uraraka immediately started pelting Ida with weightless bullets, turning the room into a giant pinball machine and forcing Ida to spend all his energy dodging. "Where are you, hero?" Ida yelled. "You may have taken down my partner, but there is no way I will go down so easily. Hiding is an act of cowardice. Or an act of intelligence," Izuku said cheekily as he stepped out from behind the pillar and shot Ida in the leg. "Oh, Brave would be so proud." Uraraka released her quirk and all the ricocheting projectiles fell to the floor as their gravity returned. She ran over and touched the bomb as Izuku tied Ida up with capture tape. "The hero team wins. Deku." Uraraka cried as she flung herself at Izuku and wrapped her arms around him. "We did it. Izuku hissed in pain as she squeezed his burns. He'd hardly felt the pain during the fight, but now that the adrenaline was going down he realized just how much having first-degree burns over his whole body hurt. Deku. Uraraka jumped back. Are you okay? Izuku gave her a shaky smile, then promptly passed out. When Izuku woke up in Recovery Girl's office, Aizawa was standing over him with an expression that was an odd mix of relieved, afraid, and absolutely cessed. Give me one good reason why I shouldn't expel him right now. Izuku bit his lip. This was what he was worried about since he'd learned that Aizawa had expelled an entire class of first-year students for being just like Katsuki, but he just couldn't expel him. His entire life, there were only two things that Izuku had known with absolute certainty, and those were that all men were not created equal and that Katsuki Bakugo would be an amazing hero. Izuku just couldn't bring himself to be the reason that one of those truths came crashing down around his ears. He opened his mouth to say so, taking a deep breath before closing it again. Would Katsuki be an amazing hero? Truly. Izuku paused, remembering all the times Katsuki had put him in his place simply because he had been born weaker. Was that someone who would be able to protect the weak, like a hero was supposed to do? Or was that someone who just wanted a license to beat people up? What about all the teachers who had just watched, praising Katsuki's quirk and pushing all the blame on Izuku for causing trouble? What had they done to make sure Katsuki would be a great hero, besides assuring him that he was better than everyone else? Wasn't it their responsibility to guide him, not Izuku's? Because it's not his fault. Aizawa let out an angry exhale, running his fingers through his hair. It's not yours either, problem child. Izuku looked up at him. I know. That threw Aizawa for a loop. He looked at Izuku with wide eyes for a long moment before sitting next to him on the bed. Then why, after everything he's done to you, why does he deserve a place at UA? Izuku took a deep breath, speaking slowly as he tried to untangle what he was thinking. It's not his fault that he is the way he is. Did you know that the teachers knew he was beating me up? They never told anyone, especially my mom, even though everyone knew. Katsuki still has a spotless record because it was easier to blame me and they didn't want to ruin their chances of being associated with such an amazing hero. No one has ever told him that what he's doing is wrong. They've taught him that it's his right as the strongest to prey on the weak and that there are people in this world that no one should care about. Izuku looked at Aizawa. You shouldn't expel him because he's never truly had the chance to succeed. He's still young and it's not too late. If someone tries, maybe Katsuki can still be a great hero. Aizawa scowled and clenched his fists a few times. Fine, he said, but I'm making him go to mandatory anger management therapy. He stood and headed toward the door to talk to Nezu, but Izuku grabbed his hand. Eraser. He looked up at Aizawa with a small smile. Thank you. Aizawa rolled his eyes and ruffled Izuku's hair. Whatever, problem child. He had his hand on the door when Izuku realized one last thing. Eraser, wait. Aizawa looked at him with one eyebrow raised. Don't tell him that I didn't want him to be expelled. He frowned. It won't go over well. Aizawa nodded and opened the door, heading down the hall. Izuku sighed and ran his fingers through his hair again. Hopefully he'd made the right decision. Bakugo, would you and your parents follow me, please? Aizawa led the three into Nezu's office where the principal was already waiting. He'd already talked to him about what Deku had said and they'd come up with a plan. As Deku's friend, Aizawa would really rather expel the brat, but as a teacher he had to admit it made a grudging sort of sense. It wouldn't be rational to expel Bakugo when this kind of behavior had been ignored and even encouraged in the past, if Deku was to be believed. If the brat messed up, however, he'd kick him to the curb. Bakugo glared at everything in the office as if it had personally offended him, which maybe, from his perspective, it had. He certainly seemed to think that Deku was trying to offend him, even when the kid had done nothing wrong. His mother was just as loud as he was, just less angry, while Aizawa would almost forget his father was there if he didn't physically take up space. It was definitely an interesting family dynamic and it made Aizawa wonder if the schools were entirely responsible for what Bakugo had become. He stood silently in the corner watching as Nezu smiled pleasantly at the family. Thank you so much for coming in. We apologize again for pulling you away from work, but this issue is better addressed immediately. Mistuki nodded. It's all right, principal, sir. What's this about, anyway? You were kinda vague on the phone. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 clapped his hands together. Well, it seems as though some rather troubling patterns in your son's behavior have come to light, and we would like to discuss how these will be addressed moving forward. What kind of patterns? Mitsuki looked at the principal suspiciously, but it was Aizawa that answered. His behavior is excessively aggressive and even violent. Oh, that's just Katsuki. Mitsuki smiled. He's an explosive boy, comes with his quirk. Aizawa scowled. He saw what Deku meant when he said it was the adult's fault Bakugo's behavior hadn't been checked. In a battle exercise earlier today, your son Noli used an attack that could have killed or seriously injured his opponent. It is only due to that student's training and quick reflexes that he was able to dodge. Bakugo scoffed and Aizawa glared at him. It has also come to our attention that he has a history of assaulting that same student in the past. Deku lies. Bakugo practically spat the words, and it was all Aizawa could do not to strangle him right then. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 raised an eyebrow at Bakugo. That may have been what your teachers have chosen to believe in the past, but let us assure you that we will not be guilty of their same failures. What does this have to do with Izuku? Mitsuki asked. What about the other student in the exercise? Izuku Midoriya was the other student in the exercise. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 said cheerfully. He was admitted to the hero course on recommendations. I met him before the school year and suspected that he had problems with bullying, which was only confirmed by your son's behavior. Were you aware, Bakugo, that such behavior could prevent you from becoming a hero? Bakugo's eyes widened in shock and Mitsuki practically started vibrating in rage. You can't keep Katsuki from being a hero. He's perfect for hero work and he's been working so hard. It's been his dream since he was a kid. Aizawa wanted to scream about how her son tried to crush Deku's dream for a decade, and what was she doing then? Masaru looked like he was trying to become one with the chair as his wife stood and leaned over 𝐻𝐻𝐿's desk, veins clearly visible on her forehead. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 just held up his hands placatingly. We are not planning on expelling your son. At least, not today. If you will please return to your seat, we will discuss our next course of action. Mitsuki sat back down, but didn't stop glaring at 𝐻𝐻𝐿, who was still smiling. Perfect. Now, as we said before, these patterns are very concerning and will not be allowed to continue. If young Bakugo here wishes to remain enrolled here at UA, he will be required to attend anger management therapy with Hound Dog, our school counselor, twice weekly during his free PRD. Bakugo jaw dropped. What? Why the F should I have to talk to some stupid shrink? I'm not fin crazy. Changes need to be made, Bakugo. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 said calmly. And therapy will be the most effective way of assisting you to make those changes as well as monitoring your progress. I'm not going to fin therapy. Bakugo slammed his smoking hands on 𝐻𝐻𝐿's desk. Then you'll be expelled and may face criminal charges for assault. Aizawa said simply. Same goes for if you attend therapy but don't make any progress. We don't need heroes running around who are going to abuse their power. Bakugo scowled, hands smoking, but sat down. Mitsuki cuffed him upside the head. Come on, brat, it's your own fault, apparently. I'm sure it won't be that bad, Katsuki. Masaru said softly. Bakugo just scoffed. We done here, or what? You just need to sign this stating that you understand the conditions of your continued enrollment and that you agree to them, and then you'll be free to go. 𝐻𝐻𝐿 said cheerfully. The family left as soon as the paperwork was done and Aizawa groaned as soon as the door closed. Is it wrong that I want him to mess up so I can expel him? 𝐻𝐻𝐿 hummed and sipped his tea. His behavior up until now has been cruel, but I believe Deku was right in saying that no one has tried to correct his behavior before. He might have genuinely thought he was in the right, or might simply have not known how to change. He set down his cup and sighed. I just hope we're not too late.